Hey, hey, it is time for a new episode of the Florida Sound Archive podcast. I am your host, Jeff Kaiser, and as you can see, I have a special guest here with me. You might recognize the face, you may recognize the name, but he is here today for what's to be a wonderful conversation on his musical journey, which spans what, 2, 3 decades now, four
Oh my
decades now,
God.
something like that. So he's here, Chuck Loose. Chuck, how are you, man? How's it going?
Excellent, Jeff. Good to be here.
It's good to have you on, man. Excited for this interview and for this conversation. When you sent me the list of all the bands that you've been in over the years, I'm like, I don't have enough hands to count.
Yeah. I don't know. My philosophy tends to be that I don't know, most bands are good for maybe 3 to 5 years. And then I mean there's exceptions. There's obviously exceptions to the rule. But yeah, most bands kind of I mean, for this genre, for punk rock, I mean,
Sure.
if you play classical music, it's probably a different thing. But for punk rock, it's kind of like most bands are good for about 3 to 5 years, and then you kind of start getting a little bit stale. I mean, I always say that like for most bands, they have three great albums in them. I mean, the first album is something like you've probably spent more years than it took than you are the band to record to get those songs together, and then maybe you've got enough for a couple more albums. I mean, it's not true for every band. There's definitely bands I love, like the Helicopters are a great example, from Sweden. Like every album they put out is slightly better than the one before it somehow magically, but they're definitely the exception, not the rule. So yeah, I kind of tend to get. I mean, it might also be my ADHD that like makes me want to like kind of get burnt, like makes me get burnt out of after a few years and move on to the next project.
And a lot of them are different. That's the fun part is, you
Yeah.
can listen to one band and listen to another one and get a completely different experience, which is a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. Yeah, it's I don't know. Who wants to keep doing the same thing? I mean, I don't know. There's definitely like a quote from Paul Simon of the Clash that I always like go back to, which is like punk is about looking forward, it's about being firmly anchored in the present and casting a glance back to the past, but being firmly looking into the future, and like yeah, wanting to experience new things and try different stuff.
What's been the most fun thing you've experienced over the years that
Oh
comes to
God.
mind?
I mean, outside of, I mean, bands, just playing music is like, I don't know. It's beyond the fun of being in a band and stuff. It's just playing music is for me, is a very cathartic thing. I just noticed that if I play music, my brain works better. Whatever like elements, whatever parts of your brain they're being activated, because a lot of times playing music is a very kind of like automatic thing, like it seems like certain parts of your brain take over that maybe you aren't even aware that you're using. Whatever that does, I've noticed is a really good thing for me. It makes my brain work better in other situations. Like I notice that I think out things better, like I don't jump to conclusions as quick. But I mean, really, for me personally, the poster thing and the art thing, which I do for a living, is probably a lot more. That would be the one thing that I could point to in my life that's the constant positive thing. I mean, the music definitely is, but the problem with being in bands, you got to be in with other people. like
Right.
yeah, doing art and like doing the posters and stuff is like more kind of my own directive where I don't necessarily have to work with other people.
That's right. And all those posters behind you are ones that you worked on directly, is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Either I designed or one of my friends designed them, and I collaborated with them on them and hand printed them.
It's awesome. Got some great
Yeah.
ones back there. Were those all shows that took place in Florida, or
Oh
are they?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. For them, I'm looking at them now. Yeah. For the most part, yeah. There's actually kind of angle at the one right above my head. That red one is for George Michael, which is one of my favorites. But yeah. I mean, I kind of like music and graphics kind of were like very um they kind of like entered my life at the same time. When I was a kid, I discovered punk rock, and I also discovered the artwork that went along with punk rock. And to me, that like was really inspirational. And I was obsessed with the imagery that accompanied music. And so, yeah, eventually I was able to, me and my business partner, we were able to start a company where we did these kind of posters for larger venues and for larger bands. And it wasn't always for music that I necessarily was a huge fan of, but like we kind of always prided ourselves on being able to create something that matched the tone of the artist and like, hopefully visually represented what they were about or what it meant to us anyway. It was always, me and my business partner, Ian, would always joke about it. Like it's fantastic if you get to do a poster for a band you love, because you know what they're about, like the visual imagery that is appropriate to the music. But sometimes the funner thing is getting a band that you know nothing about and having to like kind of it forces you to learn about them, which also for me is great because it kind of like forced me to learn a lot about music that maybe I normally wouldn't listen to, which I don't know, I think it's a great thing. There's value in all music, you just got to go and find it.
What was one of your greatest discoveries from
Oh,
one of the posters that you had a chance to do?
oh God. I had liked Wu-Tang Clan before, but I was never really that deep into them. Then we had to do a Wu-Tang Clan poster. So I was like, oh, I should really, really listen to them. And then that led me kind of like down that rabbit hole of like all the individual members of Wu-Tang who like had their own solo projects, which, yeah, like I remember like discovering Method Man through that. And I was like, oh my God, this is like, sounds goofy, but it's like, this is like verbal jazz. Like, like it's like very stream of consciousness and like not like, there's not like this kind of like a real set thing that where it has to necessarily make total sense. But yeah, that totally like opened. I was aware of him before, I just wasn't as into him until I had to make a poster for him. And actually, I don't have a copy of it now, but it's like it's an image of all the members of Wu-Tang Clan, and then it features an image of Voltron in the middle, which is name checked in their music. And so, yeah, it was just one of the most appropriate images I think we ever came up with. And it's funny because it is like the most popular poster we ever did, and I really wish that I had negotiated with Wu-Tang management a lot more. Because yeah, like every day, not every day, but at least like once a month, I get an email request from somebody asking, "Hey, I saw this poster someplace. You don't have any more, do you?" Like, yeah, sorry, no.
Yeah. How often do you reprint them in those situations to maybe sell
Generally
them?
never. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
generally never. Yeah, I mean, usually what it is we negotiate, like either the venue or the artist will come to us and they'll want a specific poster for that show, and generally we'll negotiate with them. Okay, we'll produce X amount of posters. In some cases, they'll pay us for the design and to produce the poster. In some cases, which is the typical deal, we get to keep a percentage of the posters in exchange for our labor and our labor and time, and then we get to sell those posters on our own, which for the right artist can be like really, really lucrative. I mean, like, yeah, like we did a poster for Pearl Jam, and God, like I still have a huge stack of unsold posters of artists that people really aren't interested in the poster world. But then you get to do like something like Pearl Jam or the Wu-Tang Clan one, where you're able to sell enough posters to cover like the rent on the shop for 2 months, like in a couple of days. So that's always great.
I believe it.
Yeah, but yeah, it is a real interesting world. I mean, it's like when we started doing it, we started Iron Forge Press in 2004, and like that's right around the era where I think a lot of artists. I mean, the poster thing had kind of always been around for like punk rock and kind of like jam band and rock and roll artists, but then I think a lot of other artists warmed up to it because as you know, as music became downloadable more, they needed something that they were able to sell more. I mean, that whole thing with like Napster and the downloaded music kind of shift the whole paradigm of like how music was sold. It used to be that you 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 played live shows, artists played live shows to sell records, and then it became this kind of flip where it was you distributed your music just to get people to come to the live shows and buy your merchandise. And the great thing is you can't download a poster, you can't download a t-shirt.
What came first for you, the artistic side of things or the music?
Well, when I was a kid, I was always like really into like comic books, and my dad was like an amateur artist, so he like really encouraged me when I was a kid. But honestly, like it's hard to know. I know that like I discovered like even before like I discovered like I had like a I was briefly into hard rock for a little bit before I discovered punk rock. Punk rock definitely opened the floodgates for me. But even before that, I remember like looking at like my parents' records. My dad's record collection was amazing. Like it was all 50s doo-wop and rock and roll, and then none of the hippie stuff. And then picks up again with like Billy Joel and stuff like that, which was interesting, which is very indicative of his tastes. But I just remember being fascinated by the artwork of like of albums to begin with, you know. So even before I discovered punk rock, like that was it had a huge influence on me. The other thing that really had a huge influence on me is my parents were cool, but they weren't that cool. They were pretty square. But I had a friend we first met in middle school. We were friends all through high school. And his parents were much cooler. They were like old hippies, and they would let us smoke weed when we were kids. And his mom had this book called The Art of Rock, which was like this big thick hardcover compendium that was just images of rock posters mostly. Like, and it started with like early like 50s rock and roll and went up through the 80s. But that thing just opened my mind to like the idea of like this exists, you know, that and it had all the psychedelic stuff in it, all the San Francisco Fillmore artists and that kind of stuff, and it just totally opened my mind. And yeah, and like one of the biggest coups of my life is the publishers of that did a second book, which is called The Art of Modern Rock, and they did that in their early 2000s. And I actually got a couple pieces like in that, which to me was just like, like yeah, like top of the mountain, I guess.
Did you at all come in contact with Greg Rynell? He was a guest on the podcast, and
Oh yeah, totally,
yeah,
dude. Oh my God, incredible artist, incredible artist. Yeah, I love his stuff, man. Yeah, yeah. Heatseekers played a couple shows with whatever band he was in at the time. God, I can't remember. He was in a two-man band for a
was
while.
it Nutrijet?
Yes, Nutrijet, totally,
Okay,
totally, dude. Incredible artist, man. Yeah. I always was in awe of that dude's stuff. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
me
Tampa,
too.
right?
Yeah, Tampa area,
Yeah,
Mel Melbourne. I
yeah.
think he's living at different places, but
Yeah, yeah. I think the first time I think I might have met him was I went to see the Yeah Yeahs in Orlando, I think, and that was I'd seen his artwork before, but like I walked up to the merch booth and they had these awesome posters, and he was right there selling them. I think that was the first time I actually physically met him.
yeah,
Yeah, dude, super cool dude, amazing artist.
it's always neat to see some of the punk rock musicians, have these other careers of artwork and the posters and all that. And sometimes you don't realize who's behind it until you start to dig a little bit deeper in. You're like, oh wow, I didn't know like that was his work.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. No,
so
totally. Yeah. I mean, yeah, everybody needs to pay the light bill somehow. Yeah, and
that's
I think
right.
it's fortunate. I mean, I tend to think that like just like a lot of musicians are it's a creative endeavor, you know, and so maybe they have other talents that are similar, you know, and art is definitely one of those things I think that I feel that runs parallel to music, you know. I mean, yeah, like the first stuff I started doing was when I was in high school, and a bunch of my high school friends were in crummy bands, and they would ask me to draw flyers and stuff. And then that's what in New Mexico, and then I moved to Florida in like the late 80s, and me and my friends would book shows for our goofy little bands, and it gave me even more of an opportunity to like draw flyers and write little fanzines about our little scenes and that kind of stuff.
What school in Florida did you first start in?
Oh, I know. I was my mom was a school teacher, and she actually read to me and my sister when we were still in the womb, which is this technique that actually accelerates learning. So by the time I went I was enrolled in school, I was actually already a couple of grades ahead. So but I graduated high school when I was like 16. So at that point, I started going to college, and I really, really didn't like it. The only thing I really liked was like 20th century English literature. Um, and so I basically kind of stopped going. And my mom said, well, if you're not going to go to school, you're going to have to pay rent and get a job, or I'll lend you the money to go someplace else, and then you can figure out your life that way. And so I looked at the map, and my two options were either like San Francisco Bay Area or Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I had been to Florida, like to Orlando when I was a kid. My parents took us on vacation there, but I didn't know anything about Fort Lauderdale except from like teen spring break movies that I'd seen when I was a kid. I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'll go there. Like, I mean, my mental image as it is like, I'll get off the plane and it'll be like, party. It'll be bikini girls with those hats that have the two beers on them, and it'll be like instant party. Um, and so,
Right.
so yeah, basically my mom lent me the money. So I was like 16 going on 17, and my mom lent me the money to fly to New Mexico and then a couple $100 to kind of like take care of myself. And so I got here and like I literally didn't know any. I got off the plane and I found a taxi, and the guy was like, "Where do you want to go?" I was like, "Fort Lauderdale Beach." And he's like, "Where on Fort Lauderdale Beach?" And like the idea never occurred to me that that Fort Lauderdale Beach was long. Like I just figured it would be he would drop me off and it would be like spring break, and it was not. It was like
I was
kind of
gonna
like
ask, did it meet your expectations?
not at
Was
all,
it?
because it was like the years that it was like this is like 87, 88. So it was like kind of like the years they started to crack down on spring break in Fort Lauderdale. So he's like, where in where in Fort Lauderdale Beach? I was like, the only thing I knew was the Elbow Room because it was featured in like some spring break movie that I'd seen as a kid. So he dropped me off in front of the Elbow Room. And so it was like me with a backpack and a skateboard. I'm like, all right, I guess I'm here. So like I slept on the beach for a couple of weeks, and finally got a job, and the people I got a job for were very, very kind. And like after I started working for it was like in the kitchen, like being a dishwasher and then a prep cook. And I explained my story to them, and they were very kind. They advanced me the money to be able to get like an apartment and stuff. And so yeah. By the time I got here, I was already out of school.
Wow. So
But yeah,
you
it's funny. Like it was. I tell people that story and they're like, "Oh, that's crazy." I was like, I don't know. Like at the time, I met tons of kids that were doing that. Like, like the first people I met in Fort Lauderdale were like these kids that lived at the Covenant House, which was like basically, I guess, like a place where if you were a bad kid, you ended up. It was like kind of a soup kitchen for bad kids, but they also provided like work training programs and stuff like that. But yeah, when I first moved here, I met tons of kids that were kind of like, I mean, basically runaways in worse situations than what I were for sure, like probably fleeing like like abusive households and that kind of stuff. But basically, like just had like, hey, that's a sunny place where I could probably like get along. So that's probably where I'm gonna go to get away from my terrible home situation. Not that I ever had that. My home
yeah.
situation was very, very supportive, but yeah.
Were you meeting other like-minded kids that
Oh yeah,
had
yeah.
similar interests as you, or?
Oh, totally. Yeah, yeah. I mean, uh, so I skateboarded a lot. So once I got like an apartment, this is funny. I actually remember I got an apartment because of the kindness of the people I worked for. But I didn't have enough money to turn on the electric for like a couple of weeks until I saved up my paychecks. So I had like a wind up alarm. And so I would work during the day, go home, and then go skating all night, like go skateboarding in downtown Fort Lauderdale. Um, and, uh, and then like go home, wind up my alarm clock so I could get up in the morning for work. But through skateboarding, I mean, and that was still a time when like skateboarding and punk rock were very, very joined. And through skateboarding I met like a lot of people, and then that kind of like brought me back, then suddenly I knew where punk rock shows were, and started meeting even more and more people and so on and so forth. And yeah, eventually like met the people that I would start bands with.
What was your worst injury when you were skateboarding?
Oh God, I it's funny because I still feel it. There's an area in downtown Fort Lauderdale, like a building called the Mercedes City Center. I think it's still there, but there was this two set of like five stairs, and so you had to ollie the first set, and then really quickly ollie the second set because the runoff was really short, and like I was like I wanted to like all these younger kids were doing it. I mean, and younger, I mean like 14, and like I was like I can totally do that. I can totally do that, and I landed badly and I hyperextended my knee, which is like where your knee goes past, like it goes like I landed flat footed and my knee bent backwards, but past the point that your knee is supposed to bend, and like my kneecap kind of slid out a little bit, and I mean, it was I couldn't really walk easily, and I had to put like a brace on it for like a couple months. Eventually, it healed, but it's funny. Still, like now in cold weather, or if I like overstress that knee, I can still feel it.
Especially as you get older, right? It starts
Oh
to.
no, no, dude! Oh my God! All the when I was younger, I would
Mm.
just like shake it off, like, no, you fall on your face, like, you totally ding yourself up, and it's like, I'm fine, I'm fine. And then suddenly you hit like 35, and every one of those injuries, like, it reminds you of when it happened. Yeah, yeah, no, totally, totally.
Yeah.
Every little ding I took from a skateboard in my shins has come back to haunt me over the past 10 years.
Like some people like will get tattoos to help remind them of their youth or
Uh,
whatever, but later on you'll eventually start to feel the pain and aches from injuries
oh
you
yeah,
had when
yeah,
you're
no,
that'll remind you of that time.
totally.
You know?
Yeah, listen, the machine's not getting better. The machine's just like breaking down a little bit more each day. I mean, there's things you can do to maintain the machine, take care of the machine, eat well, try and exercise. But yeah, inevitably the machine's slowly on a tapering down course.
That's right.
But yeah, no, it was funny. Like, yeah, I mean, it was. I just remember, being young and I see young kids skating now, and I watch the stuff they do, and I'm just like, oh my god, like, like, yeah, the worst slam in the world, and they'll hop back up. And I just remember there was just this point in my life where suddenly it was like, oh wow, everything hurts. And I used to like, oh
Yeah.
my god, yeah, I remember I used to like live on cheeseburgers, and I would drink like a 12 pack of beer a night, sleep 1 hour, wake up for work, like, yeah, no problem. And I remember like in my late 20s, early 30s, like, oh man, I need to sleep more. Like, I'm tired all the time and everything hurts. Yeah, it happens.
Catches up quick. So, do you remember the first time you saw a band or maybe a
Oh,
show live when you
yeah,
were in
yeah.
Florida?
Oh, in Florida?
Yeah.
Yeah, the first show, I mean, when living in New Mexico, like, I was into punk rock. Like, I probably discovered punk rock when I was like 12 or 13. The first like big show I went to when I still lived in New Mexico was MDC, which is like totally one of those watershed moments for me. It was like, I try to explain this to like younger kids, and like they sometimes have a hard time dealing with it, or understanding it. like it was, I went to go see MDC in somewhere in Albuquerque, New Mexico, when I was like 13, and there's probably 1,200 kids there, like in an Elks Lodge or something, and none of your parents knew about it, and no adult knew about it, and like only the kids that were part of the scene, and the few adults, and most of the adults were like in their mid 20s at most, like that, like, kind of helped organize it, knew about this, like, then the only way you found out was about it was maybe you went into the right record store and you saw a flyer for it, or you met some other kids skateboarding and they gave you a flyer for it or told you about the show. So yeah, I remember going to see MDC with my friends when I was 13, and I just remember being in there and just looking at it and just being like, this is what I'm into. This is totally, these are my people. This is totally what I want to be about. This is home for me. So
What
yeah, when
was
I
it about it? What was it about that
oh
scene that
god,
really just connected with you right from
the
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 start?
the energy, I mean the energy, the also just the sense of camaraderie, like the sense that like nobody else likes us. So like here's our own little community, like, um we were all, and in that era too, punk rock was like, having a funny haircut was enough to get like somebody to wing a full beer at you from a pickup truck, like on any given city street during the week. So there was this real sense of like all the misfits kind of finding their place together, finding camaraderie and something we shared, and music and energy and all that stuff. Yeah, it's funny. Like my friend Aaron, like he used to say, it's like, yeah, he lived in Berkeley, and he was like, yeah, I'd walk around Berkeley and I'd hear skateboard wheels down the street, and I knew it was somebody I knew, because skateboarding wasn't as big as it is now, and if somebody was skating, they were probably into punk rock because it was probably somebody you knew. Um, but but yeah, moving here was it was definitely an eye opener. New Mexico's more kind of like hippie punks. Everybody's, I mean, there was fights, like, stupid fights, but not the wholesale violence I witnessed when I moved to Florida. The first show I went to when I moved here was The Exploited at the Cameo, and oh my god, that was yeah, I'd never seen people beat the hell out of each other like that. It was really, yeah. I remember pulling up. It's like, so it was a friend I met skateboarding, and we went to the show together. And I remember pulling up in front of the venue, and there's two ambulances out front already. And I was like, like, what's going on? And I was like, oh, they're just waiting. I was like, waiting for what? He's like, oh, something's gonna happen. Like, and I was like, oh my God. Yeah, so it was
I mean, better
moving
to
it
be
was
proactive and then than reactive, knowing
yeah, oh,
like
totally.
what
No, no,
could
it totally
happen.
made sense because yeah, I mean, I think like during the opening band, one kid got taken out, then during the exploited, another kid got taken out. So yeah, yeah, they knew what they were doing. You know, it's like yeah, that was probably those ambulance drivers circuit in that era. You know,
Yeah.
but yeah, yeah. So that was the first show I saw, and I saw a couple other shows at the Cameo, but that was like the end of the Cameo, and then the scene kind of switched to like other smaller clubs, Churchill's. I mean, there'd always been shows at Churchill's even up to then, but for the smaller shows, Churchill started being a place to go. There's also a couple other clubs on Miami Beach. Club New would have shows occasionally. I saw some great shows there. Saw the Cramps there. Saw Fields of the Nephilim there. Yeah, yeah. Club Beirut was another tiny little club that would host like straight edge shows. I think.
Yeah.
Like I saw like Powerhouse and a bunch of the other like straight edge bands from down here at that point.
Was Powerhouse one of the earliest local bands that grabbed your attention?
Yeah, grab my attention. I became friends with a couple of members of the band. I didn't really, they were straight edge. That was their whole thing. And I didn't really, not really for me. But the people I became friends with that were in the band were like very, very cool people. Yeah, it's funny. There's there's this band from Miami called FWA, FWA. And I like, oh my God, those guys have been around for a million years. And I remember them from when I first moved here because I would go to shows and it would typically be like Powerhouse and a couple other like straight edge bands. And then FWA were all, like usually on the bill. And like of all the bands that like in those shows, FWA was the one I most related to because all the other bands were like straight edge and I wasn't really too into that. But FWA was just like these really stupid songs about fighting with your parents and like, you know, like just being a teenage idiot, and I totally related to those songs. And it's funny at the time, like the singer Jesse, he was older than most of us, not that much older, like we were probably like early 20s and he was like maybe like late 20s early 30s, but he seems so much older. And then like I see him at shows now and he still it still seems, I mean, like I gotta figure that we're probably not that far off in age, maybe he just seemed older, but he just still seems like kind of like a dad figure to me. It's very strange.
What was the difference for you between like going to, let's say, an exploited or cramp show versus going to see like a straight edge show?
Um, oh God, I mean they were pretty much the same. I mean, it was a lot of the same people. I mean, the thing like with like the exploited is it definitely brought out a whole, oh God, the exploited show like was also the first time I'd seen like really violent skinheads. Like in New Mexico we had skinheads, but they were like mostly into ska and they were like weren't really exceptionally violent or anything. But like that exploited show, it was like head hunting. It was like these skinheads that were on the prowl for punk rockers and long hairs, and it was just, you knew there was going to be violence. It's, it's weird to describe. It's like sometimes you walk into a room and there's just like this feeling that something bad's going to happen, and that's totally how that kind of show was. The straight edge shows actually, it's funny, like there was a lot more positive energy. Again, I wasn't really into the straight edge thing, but it did seem like there was a lot more like kind of like positive energy and like a lot more camaraderie with those kids.
You remember the craziest pit you ever seen?
Oh God, maybe like towards the end of that Cameo area, like DRI or something. And you know what it was? It was like that era of crossover, which really bred a lot of violence. Like it's like when metalheads kind of. I mean, when I was in New Mexico, that was I think the beginning of it. Like I remember where I grew up in New Mexico was very very rural. There was maybe 5 of us punkers, and then there was a group of metalheads, and we kind of got along with them. And then I remember like I think like Megadeth covered like Sex Pistols or something, and then suddenly the metalheads kind of became interested in like punk and they wanted to know more about it, so we kind of bonded a little over that. Whereas when I moved to Florida, it seemed like there was this real antagonism between the skinheads who they were just violent jerks, they just wanted a reason to beat somebody up. And then suddenly there was these metal kids that were starting to become introduced to punk rock that were starting to come to the shows. So I think probably I would imagine like a DRI show in that era. Actually, yeah, you know what, it was probably DRI at Club New, and that was probably one of the most violent shows I saw, because it was like, yeah, the metalheads were coming in and they had no clue what was going on. Like there was a whole culture there that they weren't aware of. And also the other thing too, actually wait, I'm gonna revise that. The most violent pit I saw was, I think, either the Circle Jerks or Murphy's Law at Summers on the Beach. And the Circle Jerks won because it was Fleet Week. So Summers on the Beach was like this, like kind of like, they mostly hosted glam rock in the 80s, and then towards the end of the 80s they started booking whatever because glam rock was kind of over, and they booked a Circle Jerks show, and they did it during Fleet Week when all like the Navy people, like all the sailors are in town for like their week vacation or something. And so I remember I was standing near the front of the club, and I see all these guys in sailor uniforms like come up to the front door, and I'm like, this is not going to go well. And so they all came in like in sailors uniforms, and they didn't kind of understand like, the at that time, I mean, the pit and moshing is different now with like crowd killing and those kind of dances and stuff. But at the time, like the pit was violent, but it was like there was a certain, if somebody fell down, you picked them up. It was like kind of like, it was roughhousing, but it was kind of an understood tribal thing. The sailor guys came in and they just saw it as a big fight. They looked at the pit and they saw it like, oh, this is a chance to kick somebody's ass. So they jumped in there and they started fighting. And then of course, like the skinheads beat the hell out of them. And I just remember like, I was sitting at the front, like by the front door, I watched all the sailors come in, and like, I like was still waiting there, like maybe like 20 minutes later when the security's bringing them all out, and they're all like black eyes and their hats are on sideways and like bleeding from the mouth. And like, I was like, wow, that went down really, really quickly. Then that Murphy's Law show, which I guess kind of lives in infamy. So Murphy's Law played there, and the bouncers were already really antagonistic about the whole freaking night. The bouncers did not like the skinheads and the punks, so there was like a bad vibe from the get-go. These two girls got in a fight. I mean, this is from what I recall. I was way in the back and I left as quickly as I could. But from what I recall, these two girls got in a fight. One girl tried to mace the other girl, and she had the mace can backwards. So when she fired it, the mace went behind her and hit Jimmy from Murphy's Law in the face. So he's like, yeah, you fucking maced me. And then the bouncers erupted. The bouncers started grabbing some of the kids. The skinheads started grabbing the bouncers. Somebody they had this huge plate glass window that faced the beach, and somebody just took a chair and threw it right through it. And I was like, wow, okay, we should leave. And I was with a couple of friends, and we ran out the back and got out of there. But it's just funny. It's just funny. Like years later, when I was in the Crumbs, we played at this bar called the Continental in New York City. And so we're loading all our gear. There's like a basement to load your gear into before we play. And we're loading our gear in there. And there's this dude sitting down there with like a pit bull wearing black, like dark glasses. He looks at us, he's like, kind of like nods to us. We're like, oh, hey, what's up, man? And so we go back out, and our roadie goes, dude, that's Jimmy Gustavo from Murphy's Law. And I was like, no way, is it really? And then I realized like our roadie's wearing a shirt that says, it's a Murphy's Law shirt that says, I survived Murphy's Law. And I was like, oh my God, let's go talk to him. So we went down there, and like, he looks at the shirt. He's like, where are you guys from? We're like, oh, Fort Lauderdale. He's like, were you guys there for the riot? We're like, yeah, we totally were, man. That was crazy. So yeah, that was probably like the worst, like the most violent thing I think I probably saw, because that was just like, yeah. I mean, I got used to it after living here for a couple of years, but when I first moved here, I was not prepared for it.
Right. I've heard other people talk about that show before.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm sure everybody probably has a different viewpoint from where you were standing and what you saw happen and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it seemed like something was going to happen at that place because the management didn't understand it. Like the management had been used to booking like Cinderella and like glam rock bands, which weren't the same level of like aggression and violence as was going to happen with punk rock, especially down here.
Right.
Yeah, Florida's a unique and interesting place.
How inspirational were those moments for yourself as you were looking to eventually start creating music of your own?
Oh, I mean, listen, as bad as those times were, there was definitely like things about them that like, I don't want to say were positive, but maybe brought out the positivity in people. Like, just like those, all right, like, having to go through something like that, having to maybe have somebody beat the shit out of you at the show, maybe made you it tested your mettle. It made you think like, do I want to do this? Like, maybe I should maybe I should be into country music or something else. Like, maybe this isn't like really for me. And so it kind of made, I think, people that were into it like decide like, okay, if I'm gonna do this, and I got to be prepared to deal with this, and I got to be prepared to fight for my scene, and maybe unite with these other people to like try and push these people out, or figure an option where these people don't want to come to our shows, so we can do stuff. And yeah, like seeing that kind of stuff, like when I got in my first band, Chickenhead, we made like really like we kind of had like a clear idea of like this is not how we want things to be. And so like when we first started playing music, we kind of like intentionally did things so we wouldn't kind of be involved in those kind of scenes anymore, like kind of like tried to build like our own like separate scene for people that were a little bit more like-minded. So I mean, it was inspirational, not in more inspirational because like, hey, we don't want this to end up like that.
Was there any band in particular that you think really inspired you the most at that time?
Oh, well, I mean, totally. I'm the stuff I always love, which is like early the founding. Just because like MDC was my entry point, like the first generation of American hardcore punk. I mean, Germs are still my favorite band of all time because they only made one album, so they couldn't fuck it up.
Right.
You only make one album and then die. You have no chance to make anything that's terrible after that. Yeah, not really local bands until later on. I mean, like as things eventually developed and as the years went by, I think there was a lot more like-minded people that became part of the scene that I found inspirational. But at the time, like not a lot of other stuff that like really like drove us. We found out those people eventually, like yeah. I mean, one of the big things is like we kind of, because like nobody really wanted the kind of music that we were playing, we were kind of forced to seek alternate venues like punk rock picnics and doing outdoor shows and that kind of stuff. And that kind of led us to like just like meet other people, maybe not the same musical genres as us, but like-minded in the sense of like how they approach community and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. What other bands were around at that time locally that were similar to what you were looking to do?
God, I mean, gosh, at first not a lot, but I mean the other bands that like kind of that we eventually bonded with were Creamy Electric Santa, who are not really punk in like the traditional sense, but are absolutely punk in the attitude sense. Like they're just really weird, interesting music, but the people that were all involved with it had just very, very awesome ideas about individuality and not making stuff that was intended to be popular. Human Oddities were also another great band from that era that I thought were just really, really fantastic. Like just really weird, kind of fucked up songs about cryptozoology and pirates and just kind of weird stuff. And they also like one of them or one of their girlfriends or boyfriends worked for the drama department or was involved in the drama department at one of the universities. So we'd make these really, really amazing costumes. And then later on, like, I guess like bands like, so that was like probably like Chickenhead era. And then later on, like when I got into Crumbs, bands like Against All Authority and Class War was another great band from that era. Belltones, like those kind of bands. Like after things kind of started filling out a little bit, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's a good time to talk about Chickenhead.
Okay. Right on.
You brought up Chickenhead. So was that the first band, like real serious band, that you ever had a chance to play
yeah,
in?
I mean, definitely the first band that was, yeah, I mean, definitely the first band I was in. And yeah, and I had met the guitar player, Erica, because she had put up a flyer at a record store that said looking to start band into, and then listed a whole bunch of like bands. And I remember Filth, who were this California band at the time, were on the list. And I was like, oh, I gotta get in touch with this person. And so at the time I just thought they were like kind of like they might be comrade in arms. I wasn't even interested in starting the band. I was just like, oh, this person's into like the list of bands. Oh God, the other band they listed was Christ on a Crutch, who were this awesome band at the time. And so I was just like, oh, I just got to get in touch with this person and just like, be like, were like-minded. So, I wasn't even thinking about being in the band. But yeah. Then I met them. She played in Bikini Kill for a while. She played in Black Flag for a little bit, which was very, very incredibly awesome and weird.
Yeah.
Like she just practiced with them, never really got the offer to be in the band, but never went with it. But yeah. And so then we started Chickenhead. Um, and I just at first we just hung out together. Um, uh, her and another member of there was just her and this my other friend Buddha. And then after we got to know each other, they asked me to sing for the band, and I was like, sure. And I really had no sense of what I should do, or like I just figured that I should just make it as chaotic and entertaining as possible. And also that was just kind of like a way to kind of like tell people, like, like, don't if you're looking for like normal stuff, don't really come around. Like, this is we're probably not for you. Like, this is just like kind of like weird self-expression. So, yeah. So it was just like really, really just kind of self-destructive and silly. I thought it was fun, but yeah, it was yeah, because I remember like eventually we got enough money together to go record like a 7-inch. And I remember like being in the studio, and like I was singing, the guy's like, you got to sing into the microphone. And I was like, what? And he's like, this isn't playing live. He's like, you got to sing into the microphone. And I like, which had never occurred to me that was what I was supposed to do. So yeah, so Chickenhead,
That's
yeah,
funny.
we at that time, I mean, like, there was not we started booking shows because there was like bands that were touring, especially from California, that we really, really wanted to like see and host. And so we started booking shows for them. And then through that, we got to meet like a lot of like the California bands that were involved with like the Lookout record label. Um, and then eventually we toured across the country and ended up in California, which point the band broke up.
What do you remember from that first Chickenhead show, considering how chaotic some of those
Yeah, not a
shows
lot.
were?
Not a lot.
What was the first one like?
Oh God, the first one. Okay, actually, the first one we played with that band, the Human Oddities, in one of their parents' living rooms. I think their parents had gone out of town, and they decided to have a show in the living room. And so I think at that point, it was just me and Erica, her playing guitar and me singing. And yeah, I think I probably got naked and ran around and maybe dumped some pudding on my head or something like that. Just,
Wow.
just silliness. Yeah. And then I mean, eventually then we codified it into something a little bit more, still ridiculous, but like maybe like a little bit more something, I guess, where you could actually do that. And then it just got really self-destructive. Like, it just got like, like lighting ourselves on fire and like breaking bottles over our heads and like that kind of silliness. And it's funny because when we broke up, we're like, we've kind of ridden this train as far as it's going to go. I mean, the next step here would be to like drop a car on me or something.
Right. Where do you
It's not.
go from lighting yourself on fire? That set
Yeah,
the bar really high, Chuck.
that was yeah, that was a bad idea. That was a in retrospect. Yeah, so
Was that completely just like on the fly, or did you plan that?
no, so I had around that time I had visited New York City, and I saw this band called The Fifth Column, who were like this weird industrial band, but the singer lit his hair on fire. And I thought it was the coolest thing. Like, he lit his hair on fire and it burned for like a minute, then he put it out. And I was like, that's so cool. I'm gonna totally try and do that. So like I practiced it. So I was like, I'm just gonna dump lighter fluid on myself and I'll light it on fire, and then it'll go out, right? And so I decided to practice it. Up to that point, I'd been doing like one part of like when Chicken play, I would blow fireballs. I would like take a mouthful of like lighter fluid and boom, blow fireballs out. And so I was like, all right, the next step is I'll just dump the lighter fluid on myself and light myself on fire. And so in my mind, what was going to happen was I was going to dump lighter fluid on myself and light myself on fire, and then jump out into the crowd and it would go out. I don't know why I thought that would happen. But
Right.
yeah, instead what happened is I jumped down and my shirt's still on fire, and I'm trying to pull a flaming shirt off over my head, and it completely burned my eyebrows off. Yeah, not. I'm glad somebody caught it on video, because I don't think most people would believe me that actually happened otherwise.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that was at Churchill's, and that was the second Lifetime ban I got from Churchill's. The first one was like Chickenhead had played a show there maybe like a month before, and I had gone to go see Judas Priest a few weeks before that show, and Rob Halford rode on stage on a motorcycle, and I thought, God, that's so fucking cool. So the so when Chickenhead played at Churchill's, I like put like a board up against the stage. I rode my motorcycle in on stage and got off, and we played. I think we played like Queen's "We Are the Champions" for like 15 minutes or something. And then the manager guy, the stage manager was like, "You're banned. You're never coming back here. Get out of here." And I was like, "All right, whatever." And then like I came back a couple weeks later and he had been fired. So there was nobody in authority that remembered I had been banned. So yeah, so then we played another show and I lit myself on fire. And that guy said, "You're banned forever. You're never coming back." And I think the next week he got fired. But yeah, the light on fire thing, not a good. I mean, yeah. So after it happened, I managed to get like the shirt off, and like I could feel like blisters bubbling up on my body from like the burns. And so I ran to the bar and I was like, "Come on, give me like I just need like a pitcher of ice." And the bartender just looked at me like he's like, "You're stupid as hell." And he just like fills up a thing with ice water and dumps it on me. He fills up another one, dumps it on me. And so like after that, I settled down for a little bit. I was like, I probably need to go to the hospital. So I went to the hospital, and so I go into the emergency room. What a waste of the emergency room. There's people that need help there. So I go in and like I'm still like my eyebrows are gone and like I'm bright red from being burned. And there's blisters coming up, and I'm wearing all this stupid punk rock crap, like boots with bandanas all over them. And so I go in, the doctor takes me in. She's like, "So what happened to you?" And I was like, "We were having a barbecue and I dumped lighter fluid on myself accidentally." And she's just like, "Okay, here's some burn cream. Yeah, you probably won't be able to. You probably need to like lay down for like 3 or 4 days." And so yeah, that was what happened. For like the next week, I had to like kind of like carefully walk around putting burn cream on myself till the blisters went down.
You still have any scarring from that?
A little bit, but yeah. I mean, also the time I was in Chickenhead, we would break bottles over our heads, cut ourselves up with glass. So yeah, it doesn't. It's all it's all water under the bridge at this point.
Quite a violent band in terms of self-inflicted pain.
Yeah, yeah. See, that was the thing though. It was intended to be violent, but not outwardly violent, inwardly violent. More like kind of a way to tell people like more like a way to alienate people that didn't understand it than necessarily a way to like hurt people, you know? Like the violence and pain was also supposed to be internalized, not externalized.
How was the band being received in some of the other places you were playing besides South Florida?
Um, Generally pretty well. I'm trying to. All right, let me think about this. We played in Richmond, and we stayed with that band Avail. Um, and we had somebody had gotten a bottle of vodka, and I was I was those were my salad days when I was green in judgment. I didn't realize how much vodka I could drink before I turned into a complete mess. And I drank way too much vodka even before the gig started. And so I was like lying in our van puking out the back while they were trying to get us into the gig. And so the Avail guys thought it was really, really funny. And so we didn't play that night, but they thought it was really funny. And then we played in like Cleveland, and not too. I think they had pizza. They'd given us pizza, and I smashed pizza all over my face and rolled around it, and everybody thought it was pretty entertaining. And then by the time we got to the West Coast, we had played enough shows where like the set was at least, it wasn't that destructive. It was at least like 60% music. So by the time we did that, like it was getting a little bit more well received because it wasn't as ridiculous. Like it actually had like some similarity to a real band.
Is that the only band you were the singer of?
Yes, yeah. So after we got to California, we kind of figured it had run its course, and three of the band members wanted to stay there in California. So I was like, yeah, it's kind of like run its course. So I came back, and at that point I'd caught the band bug and I wanted to be in another band. So I was friends with the person Emil who had roadied with Chickenhead. We came back and we were like talking like, man, we should start a band. He's like, yeah, I'll learn to play bass. And I was like, cool. He's like, and I know this guy that can play guitar, this guy Raph. And I was like, all right, cool. And I was like, so I guess there's not really a position for a singer here, huh? And he's like, they were like, no, not really. So I was like, God damn it, I'm gonna have to learn to play drums. So that's basically what I did, is I learned to play drums because nobody else wanted to do it. So yeah. So that was really the only band that like I was the front man for. Then every other band since then, it's been like drums slash backup vocals.
What's your preference? Do you prefer the drums?
Well, at this point, the drums for
Mm.
sure, because it's like, yeah, lot less weight to carry as far as like the performance goes, but also just drums is actually playing, like it's actually like there's groove, and there's that really cool thing about being in a band where you have that kind of unspoken communication with the other members of the band, and just the thing that makes music really, really cool and interesting. Yeah, I definitely prefer to play drums more than sing at this point in my life, for sure.
Who was the first band you did play drums for?
Crumbs. So Crumbs, yeah.
Crumbs.
Basically, I learned to play drums, and yeah. So Emil and Raph, we all three of us decided we wanted to be in a band, and we were we were like, yeah, we should be in a band that sounds like the Ramones. That would be totally awesome. So yeah, basically all I did is I got together the worst kit in the world, made from like partially homemade parts, and I put it together in my garage, and I just listened to the first three Ramones albums on repeat until I could like do that four on the floor, like 16th note Ramones style drumming, and then eventually got workable enough that we could actually start putting our own songs together.
And did you think at that time that it would be a band that made any headway, or like was it just kind of for
No,
fun? Like,
yeah, I mean, I've kind of always, I, I've never really harbored any delusions of grandeur. I mean, like, I don't know, just because I've observed like other people in bands and like the paths that they've taken and stuff. And I don't know, like, I've always kind of tried to hold the opinion that like, to quote my friend Glenn Danzig, hey, who I do this for? Hey, me or you? I do this for me. I mean, like, to me, like the whole point of playing music is self-satisfaction and the ability to satisfy your creative desires. And if anything else comes of it, that's fucking awesome. That's great. That's gravy on it. But the real reason to do it, to me, and I always kind of tried to hold this, is that it's fun and it makes me happy. And so yeah, the Crumbs, I mean, I don't think we really had any terrific aspirations. It then, just from meeting the Lookout people, basically what happened with the Crumbs is, so we became friends with the Lookout people, and they had some interest in maybe putting out a record of ours. And then Dookie came out, the Green Day album Dookie came out, and suddenly Lookout Records was flush with cash, because even though they didn't put Dookie out, so 1 million kids, 2 million kids, 5 million kids bought Dookie, and so 1 million of those kids became hardcore Green Day fans and wanted to hear the music that Green Day made before Dookie. And at that point, Lookout Records still owned the rights to, I think, the first two albums and a couple 7-inches. So suddenly Lookout Records went from, being this small label that I think maybe their biggest seller was like Operation Ivy or something, to suddenly becoming flush with cash. And they were able to sign a lot of the bands that they didn't, that they had liked but didn't really have the financial wherewithal to do before. And so, like, yeah, they offered to do a record for us, and we thought that was great. And this is great. We're gonna get to tour with the Queers and the Swinging Utters and play big shows, and this is gonna be totally awesome. And so yeah, it was fun. But I mean, we never really, I don't think we ever really harbored this idea. I mean, I wanted to make sure that we played as good as we ever could, and that that we presented like a really good show. But other than that, like, I didn't really think like anything beyond that. I mean, I don't know. I saw Black Flag when I was a kid. When I was 14, I saw Black Flag in Albuquerque, and one of the things that really, really sticks with me is everybody's tuning up, and Chuck Dukowski, the bass player, is ready to go. He's already tuned up, and he's just like, he's walking around on stage like thumping the bass, like, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. And to me, that was like, that's it, like that freaking energy. Let's fucking play, let's make music, let's do this. And so yeah, that was like always, I don't know, something I've always like, that's always really stuck in my mind, as far as like being in a band and wanting to be like, wanting to play music.
where do you think the Crumbs was received the best out of all the different places you had a chance to play?
Oh, California, definitely. But I mean, that kind of like, that's generally for punk rock, that's kind of like it's more acceptable there. It's funny, like in South Florida, like playing live original music, you're almost like a pariah. Like it's just not on the menu down here. This is not a place where live original music is considered like something people want to do. Like people will flock to see cover bands here. People love to go see DJs here, but just like seeing live original music or supporting live original bands here is just not, it's not part of what there is. You get a little more north into Florida, sure, absolutely, because it's close enough to the touring circuit that bands are from other places are willing to come down into Orlando and Jacksonville and stuff. But coming this far down south is just, for most bands, most touring bands, isn't really, it's too much work for too little reward. So I mean, and this is also one of the things that like touring outside of Florida opened my eyes to, like, oh my God, people like people like rock and roll and punk rock in other places. Like, in California, like people like, there's adults that are into punk rock, which, when being early 20s at the time, was very, very shocking to me. Because for Fort Lauderdale and South Florida, like, most people kind of, by the time they hit 25, they kind of left punk rock. They weren't interested anymore. So yeah, California definitely, which I think is like just generally true, because I mean, on the East Coast it's true, but definitely on the West Coast it's even more true, where it's such it's such a part of like popular culture. Like people grow up on punk rock, and it never, even if they become adults, they never really give it up. Where, yeah, here it was a lot different.
I'm assuming you all got in a van
Oh
and
yeah, yeah,
did that whole trek. Uh,
totally, yeah.
any stories from the road that stand out to you
Oh,
that you want to
I mean,
share?
just the typical stuff. I mean, it was it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I mean, I being in a van, not having a shower for 4 days, living on Taco Bell burritos with my friends is still the best times of my life, no matter what. Like, yeah, like it's not fun. I mean, listen, hey, a million bands have written songs about the road, I guess, and so it's all well documented. But yeah, I mean, just, I don't know, like, yeah, lots of we when we just when we got on Lookout, they gave us like a little bit of like a signing bonus, which was enough for us to get new equipment, because we didn't really have great equipment, and to find like a van to like tour in. And so my friend Brad was a mechanic. We used to call him the Golden Wrench. He went triple A, Against All Authority. Our friends ska band, they got a school bus and they toured in that, and they took Brad with them because the school bus had mechanical problems, and Brad rebuilt the engine on that school bus in a parking lot in, I think, Texas, which like probably speaks to like the level of mechanic this guy was. So yeah, when the Crumbs had the money to get a van, like I asked Brad, hey, will you go with me? I want to go look at a used van. And so we went and found like this like beat up like white passenger van that had been owned by like a roofing company or something, and it was just all beat up. And Brad looked at it and he's like, it'll make it. He's like, it'll make it across the country a couple times. So this is, if that's what you're looking for, this is what you should get. And so yeah, so we got this cheap van, and I remember there was a hole in the floor near it had like a 4 in the floor 6 shift, and so there's a hole, and so you could see the ground like while you were driving. No AC, but yeah, we got that, and then we all just like kind of like put the sweat equity in, built like a loft in the back, put a couch in it, like made room for all our equipment, and just like headed out, started booking shows, and headed out.
Wow. Was that in the summer?
Oh God, it was, so we went on tour a lot when I was in the Crumbs. Yeah, like I mean, God, like 3 months at a time. I'd be home for a month and go out 3 months at a time, then home for a month. But yeah, like in the winter, in the summer, the worst memories I was like driving through Arizona in the summer, and no AC, so we all have the windows open, and we're all stripped down to our boxer shorts, just driving through the at night to try and make it cooler, but that didn't really help that much. And just like, it's like feeling like we all had the windows open, it just feels like somebody's like got a hair dryer pointed at you. But yeah,
You
I
should
mean,
know about that being from New Mexico, that dry heat, right?
yeah. But even New Mexico, like where I grew up in New Mexico, is like a little bit more arid. It was like the northern part of the state, which is more like the tail end of the Rocky Mountains. But yeah, the flat desert of Arizona is, oh, that heat ain't going nowhere. There's nothing to dissipate it. There's no greenery. Yeah, it was brutal. Yeah, I mean the other funny, I guess like one funny story I could think from that area. I mean there was like a lot of just stupid stuff that happened, but the one funny thing is we were driving through, God, it was Arizona. It was actually Arizona. And so we're driving, and it's just like it's a janky looking van, and so it's not really the most unsuspicious thing that a passing cop's going to see. And so we're driving, and we see like the cop lights in the back window. We're like, all right, we're getting pulled over. Just everybody, just chill. So we pull over, and so the cop comes up to us, is like, so where are you from? What's your name? And so I'm like, oh, Chuck Loose from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Emil Bussey, I'm from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. John Bonanno, our other guitar player, from Miami, Florida. And then Raf, our singer, had the thickest Spanish accent. He's like, Rafael Luna from Miami. And immediately the cop is like, get out. All of you get out. And I was like, and they were like, what's going on? I was like, man, we're not in South Florida anymore, dude. People in other parts of the country are really racist, like as soon as they heard that Spanish accent, they were like, their racism meter kicked in. And so yeah, they made us like get out of the van, and they had to take everything out of the van, and they had to search through everything in the freaking van. And yeah, it was funny. They were going through our bags, and they came upon this like little like in somebody's bag, it was like this little like container, and they opened it, and it's full of white powder. And of course, being from Miami, they're looking at us like thinking it's cocaine or something. And we're like, oh fuck, nobody brought drugs. We said not to bring drugs. And then like I kind of look over at it, and it's filled with white powder. I was like, no, none of us could afford that much cocaine. And so they went and did the drug test on it. It's talcum powder. Like it was just like baby powder that
Right.
somebody brought in their bag. And but that was funny. It was just like the cops were just like, oh, we got him now. And the cops came back and was like, yeah, it's talcum. Get out of here.
Do you ever get arrested on any of those tours?
No, hassled but never arrested.
Okay.
Yeah. I think like seeing like you see this beat up van with a Miami plate, like there's automatically assumptions. But yeah. I mean, just the typical cop hassles, make us get out, take all our stuff out, go through everything. When they see that we're just traveling musicians, they would let us go.
That's good. That was nice.
Yeah. It's done a lot better than the alternative.
Right.
Yeah, I can't imagine being arrested in some little podunk town in the middle of nowhere, and with no money in our pockets. I mean,
That,
and that's the thing. Is like, yeah, I mean, those are some of the best time. I was telling somebody about that the other day. It's like I remember being somewhere in the middle of the country. Like I know at some point we went to every one of the states that's in the connected part of the United States, but I couldn't tell you much about them except with a few exceptions. I was like, yeah, I think there was an Arby's there or something. We got to town, we played a show, we ate, we left. But I remember like being like somewhere, maybe it was near like Cleveland or Cincinnati, and I remember like we had just enough gas to get to the gig, and on top of that, we maybe had like $7. So we stopped at the grocery store and bought like a loaf of bread and a thing of bologna and made it into sandwiches. And I was like, God, we just got to get to the next gig. And we got to the next gig, and luckily we had t-shirts to sell. We sold all our t-shirts. We suddenly had like $300 in our pocket. Like, all right, we're awesome. Yay, back on the road. Um, but yeah. But even like being in that situation was just like, this is still the best time of my life. This is still like there's nothing that's going to be better. The best day working is still worse than the worst day touring.
where were some of the places you were sleeping?
Oh God. One thing I started to develop is I'm going to sleep in the van to protect the equipment, but also because then I won't have to sleep on the floor of some disgusting punk house where I wake. Yeah, just I remember waking up and there's like pennies stuck to me, and or like waking up and like opening my eyes, and the first thing I see is like a cigarette butt and a cat turd. Like, yeah. So like after a while, I just developed like, I'll sleep in the van, guys. It's cool. I'll totally get it. And then the other thing that developed from that is like a sense of like how to tour well, backpack, how to load everything in my backpack, sleeping bag, my own pillow, the small tube of toothpaste, Q-tips, a small toothbrush, like all that kind of stuff, like just develop like kind of a sensibility about like what the very minimum I should bring, but that's going to satisfy everything I need to do.
Were your bandmates similar minded like you?
Not so much. Not so much. A lot of trash bags just jammed with clothes, and then like a weekend they smell really really bad and they can't find their socks.
I was gonna ask. I mean, are you actually doing laundry on those tours?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I mean, yeah, it would get bad. But yeah, there's actually times that I would force other, like, I mean, and this is true for like every band I've been in that I've toured in. Like there would be a time when it's like, we're doing laundry tomorrow. No, I'll do your laundry for you if that's what I have to do, but we're doing laundry. There's no way this can continue to go on like this. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like, and also like it's like, like it's even like the bands I was in later, it tended to be like I tend to be the older one in the band, because it's like, people in bands tend to be like in their mid-20s, especially if they're like, they have the freedom to tour. And so like, yeah, there may be not personal hygiene and sanitary services and taking care of their laundry is probably not the biggest concern in the world to them, but it is to the people around them. So yeah, yeah, it would be a, yeah, like no, and eventually after doing that enough, like I would build a tour schedule, because I usually book most of the tours, where I'd build in like during the week, during the day of the week that we were least likely to get a show, make that laundry day. And yeah, just find a laundromat and wash everything.
What made you decide to leave the Crumbs with all the fun, the touring and the records you were
Uh,
coming out, the Lookout signing and all that? What made you decide to leave the Crumbs?
I got tired of it. I mean, like it was definitely like a lot of fun, but then it does wear on you, I mean, like missing my bed and my cat, like having to leave my apartment in like the hands of like a friend that sublets it and hoping they're taking care of my pets. Yeah, and also, I mean, just the other thing too is just, once you're trapped in a van with somebody for 8 hours a day for 3 months in a row, you start to really, the little things really start to get to you, like I can't stand the way this person chews. And when I was in the Crumbs, we would have this thing where like when we get off tour, we don't talk to each other for 2 weeks. If you see me on the street, go to the other side of the street. Don't talk to me. Don't call me. Don't communicate with me. If you see me at a show, stay on the other side of the venue. Like, because like by the time we get off tour, we'd just be so irritated with each other. I mean, which happens, familiarity breeds contempt, uh, uh, so yeah, it would like after a while I just got tired of it. And also too, it was like I kind of realized like I couldn't, it was fun, but like I couldn't make like a life of it. And I was really interested in doing art, and I really really wanted to like pursue that. And you can't really it's difficult to like tell graphic design clients, hey, I'm going to be gone for 3 months, so I can't really work on any of your projects till I get back. So yeah, like, yeah, it just reached that point.
Did things slow down with the Crumbs after your departure? Did it seem to still kind of remain the same? What was it like for the Crumbs after you left?
Well, I mean, they kept on going, but I think they were kind of like losing like a little bit of steam too. I think like it's just, yeah, it wears you down, like like it's definitely fun, and I really really enjoyed it. But also it does, eating shitty food and not sleeping enough, like, after you do that for enough cycles, it really really starts to get hard to deal with. So yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, and I think they were also, as you grow up, you start to have other interests, having some kind of stability in your life. And so I think that just happened for all of them after I left as well too. Like, they wanted to just pursue other stuff. I mean, the Crumbs still exist. Raph still keeps it going. He's got like, different band members at different times, but he still keeps it going. I mean, not at the level it was when we were doing it, not like that hardcore like touring like half of the year kind of thing anymore, but he still does it. But I mean, yeah, he also has a job and a life
Did
outside of it.
did your relationship change after you left the band?
Yeah. I mean, just because we weren't around each other anymore, and there is that thing about like if you hang out with somebody every day, you have a different, what's going on in their life all the time. And then if you don't see them, then you catch up with them when you see them, you get to hang out and you get to, recall the past, catch up with the present and stuff. But yeah. Just because we weren't, I mean, the other thing was we were changing too. Like we were moving out of our 20s into our early 30s, and it was like, you become a different person then for sure. Just life is different.
And it seemed like after the Crumbs, your career with a lot of different bands exploded.
Oh
It was
yeah.
like a
Well, I just
renaissance of all these different.
I just can't imagine not playing music.
Yeah,
And I mean, and the one thing about playing in a band is it kind of forces you to like kind of do that. The thing is like if you just do musical projects on your own, it's easy to go, oh, I'm not going to work on that tonight. But if you're in a band with other people, then it's definitely more like, oh hey, practice is Tuesday and we're already here, and you said you would be here, and so you better be here because we need to practice. And we booked the show, and so we got to show up to the show, and if you don't show up, then we're all going to be screwed. But yeah, I mean, and I just can't imagine not being in bands. It definitely wasn't. I mean, I think the next band after that was maybe Heatseekers. Maybe I can't. It all kind of runs together.
I would
After a
imagine
while.
so.
Like, yeah, but even Heatseekers toured, but at that point we had like a little bit more of like like all of us were like we had, I don't want to say, I guess, kind of careers, or we had like jobs that we cared about that we like to do. So like touring wasn't, we weren't able to tour like half the year like I was able to do in the Crumbs. Like Heatseekers toured and played South by Southwest a couple times, and so yeah, tours were just kind of like more like, all right, we're going for 2 weeks and then we'll be back.
What did you like most about the Heatseekers?
Oh, the music. I love,
Mm.
I mean, the people for sure. Like, yeah, those are my brothers and sister. Like, I love those people so much. Like, but also the music. I mean, like, I love that primitive rock and roll. Like, I mean, the Heatseekers, I guess, was more like garage rock, I guess. Like, that's probably the general term for it. But I just love that music. Like, I don't know, to me, that's like, look, going back to like my dad's records when I was a kid. Like it's funny, like so when I was a kid, I was obsessed with like the music that he liked, and he had like he grew up in rock and roll. Like he saw Bill Haley and the Comets. He saw Screaming Jay Hawkins, which was amazing. Like he would tell me about it. When I was a kid, it didn't have as much impact as it did later in my life. Like he was like, oh yeah, I went to see Screaming Jay Hawkins, and there was a coffin on stage, and then this black guy bursts out, and he's dressed like a voodoo guy, and all the kids in the front are screaming and fainting. And like at the time, I was like, okay, Dad. But then later on, after I really discovered Screaming Jay Hawkins, I was like, my dad saw that. That's so freaking amazing. But it's funny, like after I discovered punk rock, I remember like really getting into the Ramones, and then going back and listening to my dad's record collection again, and being like, oh, this is all the music that like made the Ramones. Like all that garage rock and stuff was like that without that the Ramones wouldn't exist. And so yeah, I always really really loved that 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 kind of music, but also the more specifically than just like those bands, like the primitivism of that whole kind of like early garage rock scene. I mean, the stuff that's on like Lenny K's Nuggets compilation and the Pebbles compilation, like all that like 60s frat rock and stuff is like, it's very primitive and
Yeah,
yeah, which I really did, because to me, like, I don't know, like to me, like punk rock has always existed in some form or another. Like when we were cave people out in the Serengeti, and somebody built a fire, and Oog took a stick and hit it against a tree, and Og took two rocks and smashed them together, and we all got together and ate some wild bison that somebody had caught or something, and we danced around to music and had fun, and we felt like maybe the world wasn't so scary and cold. Like that's punk rock. That's like rock and roll. That's like the primitive aspects of beat and rhythm and melody that that still makes rock and roll cool today. So
that's
yeah,
right.
Heatseekers, I love the people, and I definitely love the music.
Yeah, they were a lot of fun to see live.
Oh, right on.
Uh,
That dude, that was the other thing. Very super energetic, like, which is just so fun to play. Like, oh yeah. Like I always tell the story, like when I was in the Crumbs, we played with this band called Teen Generate from Japan, and they were the most turned on band I'd ever seen. Like from the first riff, they were just like so into it and so excited to play and like jumping around and acting crazy and I love that. And to me, like the Heatseekers had that kind of like that energy where it's just like, yeah, let's rock and roll, let's have fun, you know, let's make this like silly and crazy and energetic.
Who were some of your favorite bands to play with when you were in the Heatseekers?
Oh God, geez, that's a good. Irish Car Bomb were great. Um, God, who else did we play with in the Heatseekers? It's hard to remember that era. You know, it's funny. Like I just I go back and look at like old flyers and stuff from that. I'm like, oh, we played with that band. I totally forgot about that. Yeah. There was like a lot of really great bands. One of my favorites was a local band called The Remnants, who were like some slightly older people that had moved here from New York at different times and then formed a band. And they were just like kind of like bluesy rock and roll, but they were really, really, really cool. I mean, Against All Authority, I think Heatseekers might play with them a couple times at that point. God, who else? There's so many. It's hard to
I
recall.
think I saw the Heatseekers play with the Bitter Cups a couple times.
Oh yeah, totally. Yes. Oh my God. And those guys. So yeah, the Bitter Cups. Before the Bitter Cups, the people that were in the Bitter Cups were in another band called Billy Belobi, which was just like, oh, it was so funny. It was uh, uh, like they they worked really hard to work out these kind of skits that maybe not everybody in the audience got, but the people that did get it was amazing. So yeah, the Heatseekers. Before we played with the Bitter Cups, we played with Billy Belobi, and we played at this record store in West Palm Beach. Got Sound Exchange, and it was like a little record store, and we played with them, and they Billy Belobi came out. They played a couple songs. Then they all put on aprons that had like a hammer and sickle on them, and they all put on these like little like hats, like the kind of like hats like a soda jerk and an ice cream shop would wear. And they said, and they went, "We're socialists, but we're ice cream socialists." And they brought out these huge 5-gallon tubs of ice cream, and they started making ice cream cones for everybody, like all the kids that were at the show. And of course, it turned into like an ice cream fight, and everybody lobbing ice cream at each other. But it was just the most. It was just like so fun and stupid and like silly. And then I remember the Heatseekers played another show with Billy Belobi, and they for that show they called themselves Vanilla Friendship Bracelet, which in their minds was like a distortion of it was a distortion of Chocolate Watch Band, I think, or some 60s psych band. But
Yeah.
anyway, they all dressed in like black metal, like they all wore corpse paint, and and they all like dressed in black. And the Heatseekers played with them at this little venue that was like a place where it was like a coffee bar, I think, where AA people hung out. And so already the concept is very kind of like, it's very meta, and you kind of know them to understand the concept. It's already kind of off the charts, and then they're presenting it for these people who are like recovered alcoholics that just want to do their kava and aren't expecting this, and they were so confused by it. And like there's maybe like 10 of us there that they're getting the joke. They're like, this is ridiculous. And then at one point, like the singer Jason goes, now it is time for the milkman. And they had one of their friends come out dressed as a milkman, carrying a pitcher of milk, and he gave like glasses of milk to everybody in the audience. Yeah, it was just very, 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 very well thought out stuff that I don't think anybody got. I loved it because I thought it was so ridiculous, but
Yeah.
I don't think everybody in the audience really, really got it. Yeah, Heatseekers also played. We played a lot of shows at was it Fubar at the time? No, it was formerly the Metal Factory, then became the Factory.
Right.
And
In
yeah,
Fort
in that
Lauderdale.
era, there was a couple. I think Grant Hall was booking a lot of shows there, and yeah, we had the fortune to play like on a lot of the shows that were more kind of like, I guess, like in our style, like more like rock and roll style band
Yeah.
kind of stuff. Although he did book like a lot of hardcore and and like emo stuff for the time.
Did you find that fans of the Crumbs were also finding they were fans of the
Oh,
Heatseekers?
yeah, I think so. I mean,
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, it's rock and roll, you know. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think it's like, yeah, for people that like, yeah, totally. And the weird thing is like from just the era that the Crumbs were at, I think for a lot of kids, it was kind of like their entry point into punk rock, which is like, wow, I feel very honored to like be that conduit for like a lot of kids' lives, because I understand how much that MDC show I mentioned meant to me, and so yeah, it was I think like it was funny because like the kids that were probably like 15 when they saw the Crumbs were probably maybe getting into their 20s when they saw the Heatseekers. So yeah, it was like I think most of them dug it. Like I think they saw the similarities there.
How was touring any different compared to when you're with the Crumbs in the 90s and then touring some with the Heatseekers in the early 2000s? Was there any difference or
Oh well,
in the
yeah.
way that
I
you were
mean,
touring?
yeah, just because we were better financed, because by that point we were all like adults with like real jobs. So like it wasn't like, in the Crumbs it was like, oh God, I really hope I can come back to my job when we get back, because I've got like, $3 in my pocket coming back off tour. Whereas like in the in the Heatseekers, it was like, oh, okay, well, we all have like jobs, and like we've got situations set up where if we take off for 2 weeks, it's not going to really be that big a deal. And then the other thing too is like I had bought like a Honda Odyssey minivan before the Heatseekers, and that's what we used to tour in. And so it was really nice. It was like so it was a minivan, and it was enough to fit four of us, maybe five if we put down the middle seat, plus all our gear. But it also had like a really nice sound system and cup holders all over and a flip down TV. It was like a made for soccer moms.
Yeah.
And so and then the other thing too is like I put like one of those soccer stickers on the back window, which assured that we never got pulled over by cops, because cops would see us like going by and they would think like it didn't, like in the van in the Crumbs it was like, sketchy white van with no windows with a Miami plate, questionable. Like Heatseekers, like, oh, soccer mom van with a soccer sticker, Fort Lauderdale. Ah, no, they're probably not worth investigating.
Right.
But yeah,
Wasn't that
yeah.
suspect?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And also like, yeah, we were also like in the Heatseekers, like financially of the ability to actually get like hotel rooms and stuff. So we didn't have to like sleep on people's floors so much, which was a welcome change.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. But yeah,
Oh,
yeah, and also like, yeah, just getting to, I mean, also it's funny to like think about how much it changed. Like when I was in the Crumbs, like we played a South by Southwest, that music festival in Austin, and it was like very, very sparse. It was like I think, I don't know if it was maybe the first years or just it really hadn't taken off. And then when the Heatseekers played in it, played one, it was like it had become like the destination event for like, that people plan their year around taking off to go to Austin for like for it. And it was just like so much bigger and intense and amazing. It was really amazing. I remember like, I mean, the Crumbs one was cool. It was like I got to see like a bunch of like, punk rock bands I wanted to see. But then like the one that we went to with the Heatseekers, I got to see 3 6 Mafia, and I got to see Elvis Costello. So it was like definitely a lot more impressive.
did you get a chance to meet any of the other artists that were headliners at a show like that?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the one thing about like something like that is like you're just so, especially being from South Florida, none of those bands were going to come down to South Florida. I mean, maybe one out of 50 of them. And suddenly like you're hanging out with them, you're in the same space with them, and like, yeah, you get to like, you get to just, yeah, I know. I mean, it was the same day we like went to go walk down, we saw 3 6 Mafia, and then we were walking back, a club, and kind of peered in. It's like, oh dude, Elvis Costello. And like, walked in, then walked down a little bit further, and like, oh my God, the Gossip and Exene Cervenka's playing here. And so yeah, yeah. And then like the next day we were like, eating barbecue at Stubbs, and we're sitting next to like Exene and John Doe from X. So yeah, it's just a thing that doesn't really happen down here too much, just as being removed from everything as we are down
Yeah.
here.
And the Heatseekers, to my disappointment,
Uh-huh.
personally, only
Uh,
put out one record.
yep, that's it.
Why? Why was that? Why was that it? Why
Well,
was there nothing else?
I again, just people changing and moving on. And look, most bands are happy to have one really good album. Yeah, yeah. No, no.
True.
Just all the band members were wanting to move on to other stuff. Singer got in a relationship and they wanted to move out of state. And so yeah, yeah. Just people changing, people's lives changing and stuff. And yeah, you gotta. I mean, it's if it's gonna if it's not easy, you got to let it go sometimes. If it's
Yeah.
not, if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be, and it doesn't make sense to fight it.
Did you all ever record any other music that just was never released, or was that really just what was on the CD?
That was pretty much it. I mean, I think there's probably some other stuff recorded. Maybe I'll look in a hard drive and see if I have it. But yeah, that was pretty much it. That one album. I mean, like, yeah, that was, and those have been songs we've been playing for a while. Maybe there's like 3 or 4 other songs outside of that, that maybe we just recorded demo versions and stuff of. But yeah, and that was great because we put that on our friend Gabe's our record label Ohev, which also put out a bunch of other really amazing stuff, none of which sounds the same. He also put out that band he put out that band Hot Heat.
Yes.
And they had like a kind of like radio hit like a few years later. Rocking Horse Winter, who are kind of like more like emo, I guess. Yeah, and I just love that record label because he put out, God, what was it? Like it's a D-beat band from Minneapolis whose name escapes me now. But that I just love that label because it was just like so nothing. It was like there wasn't a sound on it that like there wasn't you couldn't say like, oh, that's the Ohev sound. It was like, everything he put out was like so interesting and different.
It was quite different than you couldn't just take one and go right to the other, like,
oh totally, yeah, I know, exactly. Yeah, no, I remember like looking at like because I didn't really know about too much of the other artists on the label until like he wanted to put out our record, and then I like listened to like the other stuff, and I was like, oh my God, this is like, yeah, it's all over the place, which I think is super fucking cool. Like, yeah, I mean, I guess there's something about like continuity and expecting everything to kind of like have the same kind of feel, but there's also something really cool and uniquely surprising about like listening to 5 different bands that are all on the same label that have 5 different approaches to music.
That's right. And speaking of a different approach, I think one of my other favorite bands that you were in later was the Czars.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. That was like an honor to be in that band because yeah, those guys were in bands that like I worshipped, Yeah. So the first version of Czars is Mike O'Brien from the E, Jeff Hodap, who was in Roach Motel, the drummer from the E, and then different bass players at different times. And then Chris Cotty, the drummer, passed away, and they asked me if I wanted to join. I was like, oh my God, I would love to join. And yeah. So those, oh God, just being in a band with those guys was just like so amazing. I mean, Roach Motel are like arguably like Florida's first hardcore band, I guess. And the Eat are like, I remember when I first discovered the Eat, like, and I discovered them probably the way a lot of other people discovered them was via Jello Biafra. So yeah, the Eat, for anybody that doesn't really know, were like kind of like at the time a fairly obscure Miami band. They put out a couple 7-inches, both totally amazing. Two 7-inches, then a couple LPs, but at that point, Jello Biafra wrote about them and wrote about how great they were, and suddenly the 2 7-inches became incredibly collectible. Where like one was at the time, one was worth 300, one was worth 400. I think probably now you can get probably like $1,000 each for them. But the Eat were just so neat. They were like this like driving, but not like you could, this weird collection of influences. Like there's Blue Oyster Cult in there, and there's the Police in there, and then there's like straightforward punk rock in there, and then there's like a million other things that I can't even begin to know because it was like what they were all about, And so yeah, I remember discovering the Eat from reading about them in Maximum Rock and Roll, and then finding there was a place called was it All Books and Records? Yeah, All Books and Records, which is like a used record store, and finding one of their 7-inches, and inside was the address for their record label, which was a PO box in Hialeah, and writing to them, and then one of them writing back, I think it was actually Chris Cotty, the drummer, writing back going, oh yeah, we're not really, we play like a reunion gig like once a year at this place called Churchill's, and I was like, oh, I gotta go check it out. And like, of course I went to go see it. I was totally fanboy geek, and they're like, why are you even asking us these questions? Like, who are you? And yeah.
Little did you know at that time you would set yourself on fire at the stage.
Yeah. Hindsight's 2020. but yeah. So then, like being able to play with those guys was just like such a like a total honor, and I love those. I love those songs. I love that music. Like it's just so weird and kind of negative and interesting.
Why do you think they recruited you to be the drummer?
Because I was always hanging around, and like I'd been playing drums. I think at that point I wasn't actually. I think that was before Heatseekers, after Crumbs. I think. God, it's hard to remember sometimes. But yeah. I think it's just like that. They needed a drummer, and I was like probably like the closest option that was available, that was willing to do it, and was accessible probably.
Any drugs are shows stand out to you as a good memory for you?
Oh god, so one time we played a Halloween show at this place called the Culture Room in Fort Lauderdale, and um and Mike, the singer guitar player, was like, yeah, we should wear costumes. I was like, I don't know, what do you wear? He's like, oh, it's just like cats. So we all got little cat ears and little cat tails, and dressed in black. But it was just the weirdest thing, because it's like these four middle-aged men dressed as cats playing this weird punk rock, which I thought was really awesome. Yeah. I don't. We didn't play too many like out of town shows with that band. They were all like, I think maybe the farthest out of town we played was like West Palm Beach, just because like they were older and weren't in the idea of traveling too far. But it was a really great experience, and I really loved playing those songs. Yeah, and I got to be in that band with another one of like my Florida punk rock idols, Marky Awesome, who was in Trash Monkeys and some other like South Florida bands, like early South Florida bands, and he played bass in it for a while. So yeah, no, it was a cool experience.
It really was like a super group of Florida
Yeah,
punk rockers.
a super group for like unknown Florida weirdos. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So yeah, the Drug Czars put out, I think, a couple 7 inches, and
Yeah.
there was a split that you all did with I think an all girl band called the Gargirls.
The Gargoyles, yes, that was actually, yeah, that was, so Jeff, who played guitar in in Drug Czars, he had been in Roach Motel. He was also in another band called Morbid Opera with his wife Lisa, and Lisa had started an all girl band called Gargoyles, and so yeah, there was a split 7 inch with Gargoyles and Drug Czars, and then I think there's two other Drug Czars 7 inches. One is called On Venus, Drug Czars on Venus. I can't remember the name of the other one. But yeah, Gargoyles were great. Just like there's an old South Florida all girl band called Teddy and the Frat Girls, who were on Alternative Tentacles Records. They have a 12-inch Alternative Tentacles Records, but I feel that like Gargoyles were like the spiritual like the spiritual children of that band of Teddy and the Frat Girls. Like they kind of carried the torch of sloppy all girl punk.
Were there any other all girl punk bands or that you kind of remember from the scene down there that
God,
stood out to you?
not really. I mean, there was definitely like bands that had female people involved. I mean, like Creamy Electric Santa, the Priya was in the band and played violin and sang, and they had another girl named Jan who like sang backups and did headstands. But yeah, there wasn't really. Yeah, I can't think of any other like all female bands. I mean, there's definitely like females involved in the bands for sure, but like not any band I can think about is all female. I mean, the other female fronted band that really I can think of was Los Canadians, which was actually two members who were also in Chickenhead, but fronted by our friend Ivy, who just had the most dynamic voice ever, like very soulful. It's just like such a really amazing singer and front woman.
I had to also just quickly mention, speaking of female bands, recently, the posted
Check out the
the posted 7-inch of Jack Off Jill.
Uh,
So what was your connection with Jack Off Jill? How did you all get connected? And
oh, I was just really good friends with Jessica. Like we dated for a while. Yeah. I was never really into. I love her, love all the other members of the band. Never really too into the music they were doing. I really didn't like Marilyn Manson. Like I thought it was just kind of stupid from the get go. Like I was just like, this is like dumb. It's just like shock for the sake of shock. Like it's easy to shock people. I mean, it's not. It doesn't take any special skill. I mean, shocking people for the sake of making a point. Okay, totally. I absolutely understand that. But just like Marilyn Manson and it just that whole kind of scene just really rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't really like it. And at the time, like I think Jessica had her problems with members of them, but it wasn't as out in the open as it is now, where she's accused like Jordy, who she dated at the time, of being a sexual predator, who was the bass player for Marilyn Manson. So yeah, I always loved those people. I mean, it's the same thing with that band Load. I loved all the members, never could really get behind the music. like they were okay, and I really, yeah, I mean, Bobby was like, I loved Bobby. Like I have so many awesome memories. So we all lived in this punk house like in Fort Lauderdale, where I think it was like a 3-bedroom house, and there was like 15 of us living there, which made rent for everybody like $60 a month at most, which was great. I mean, like like you didn't have to work too much, and you could you could totally survive. And I have so many memories of like waking up on a Sunday morning and like sliming out of bed and walking to like our kitchen, the communal kitchen, and make some coffee. And Bobby's sitting there, Bobby from Load. And he's like, hey man, hey, what's up? And I'm like, oh, hey dude, you're here? Why are you here? Oh, one of your roommates gave me a ride back here last night. I was like, oh, that's cool, dude. It's good to see you. He's like, you want a beer? And then he would offer me like a room temperature Bush 16 ouncer. I'd be like, yeah, dude, I'm good. I'm totally good. So yeah, that was like, yeah, Jack Off Jill, love the people, never a huge fan of the music, you
yeah,
know. But I mean, I don't know. You can't. Music's music. Sometimes very much a matter of personal taste.
absolutely. That's what I like about a lot of the different bands you're in, because there's so many of them that you start to listen to a lot of them, and there's so a lot of them are so different in the way that they
That's
sound.
awesome. I really thank you for saying that. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Like the world of music is so interesting, and I mean, I think they're probably all within the kind of same subgenre. But like, yeah. I mean, the world of music is so huge and interesting. Like, why wouldn't you want to? What do you eat chicken every day? Like why wouldn't you want to like go and like experience the multitude of flavors?
I would say, one of the bands that just stands out in terms of just how different it sounds, and I don't know how long you were in the band for, you'll have to hopefully share, was Obsidian,
Oh yeah. I was
because it
up
was
until
more of a
recently.
goth
Like
rock
goth
type
rock, yeah.
sound.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I always like consider, like I always consider goth part of punk. Like I
Yeah.
don't know, to me when I was a kid, when I was like, first getting into punk rock, like the term goth hadn't been like kind of established yet. And so there was always those like there's always those members of the punk rock community who maybe into like darker stuff, like like into Bauhaus, or like into like Susie, like into more of the punk rock stuff, or even the stuff that was like a little bit louder and crazier, maybe into like a birthday party, and even like on the punk side, TSOL, bands like that. And like at the time we didn't have the term goth, so that we generally called those people death rockers. But like to me, that's part of like the continuum of punk rock. I mean, one of my favorite eras is that era from probably maybe like 1979 to maybe 1983, where there's that kind of goth darkish music happening, but it's happening like all over the world, kind of like at the same time. There's like like birthday party, and then later Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds from Australia. There's like a whole British like scene there of like Sisters of Mercy, the Damned. I mean, even though they're early on, like kind of like they're kind of like coming into like their own as like a kind of like goth kind of band there. Then there's the
And the
LA.
drug czars open for the Damned.
Oh yeah. Oh my God, that's a great
Not
story
to shift
too.
gears so quick. Yeah. What
Okay,
was that?
yeah.
What was
Let's
that
hop back to that
like?
story really cool. Really
Yeah.
quickly. Yeah. So the Damned were scheduled to play in Fort Lauderdale, and the Drug Czars were gonna open for them. And so the day of that show, like a hurricane was coming in. And so like I at that time I lived down the street from the venue. And so probably about like maybe like noon or 1 o'clock that day, all my power went out. So I'm like, all right, well, the show's probably not happening. And this is also pre-internet and cell phone communication. So like it wasn't, couldn't just text somebody and go, hey, what's going on? So the power went out. So I figured like, well, if my power is out, the venue's like a couple blocks over, the power's probably out too, and it's not happening. So I'm like, well, I guess just go into hurricane mode. So I took down the bottle of rum and just started drinking. It's like, I'm just gonna try and pass out early and try and, hopefully we'll have power back in a couple days or whatever. And so like I get kind of buzzed, and they hear a knock on the door, and I'm like, what the hell? And I open it, and it's Jeff from the drug dealer. He's like, you ready? And I'm like, ready for what? He's like, the venue still has power. They're still having the show. And I'm like, they're still having the show? Like, it's a hurricane. He's like, yeah, they're still having it. So let's go. I was like, all right, all right. So I scrambled and got all my drums together. We packed it up. We went over there. And so, yeah, so it was the Damned, the Livid Kittens, and the Drug Czars at Foo Bar in Fort Lauderdale in the middle of a hurricane. Maybe 30 people there, max 30 people there. And so, but the power stayed on the whole show, and the Damned wanted to play, and we were like, all right, totally cool. And so yeah, we just all hung out. It was just totally amazing. We got to hang out with the Damned, and that was also like my second favorite Damned lineup, because it was Patricia Morrison on bass, and Dave Vanian. And for a second there, I thought like, man, I bet I could hit on Patricia Morrison. Then I realized that she was married to Dave Vanian. I was like, oh, he's Dave Vanian. Like, oh my God, like I've never, he's like God, like,
Right.
But it was like just the just such a weird, fun show. Like 30 of us huddled down, like joking around with Captain Sensible in the middle of a hurricane. And the promoter wasn't too happy about it, because he still had to pay him. They played the show, and even though nobody showed up, he still had to pay him. But it was still a lot of fun. All right, so switching back. So yeah. So that era between like 79 to like 82, 83, there's a lot of like that dark music, which I guess becomes it's called goth later on, but at the time there's not really a word for it, and it's like all over the world. There's British scene, there's the Australian scene. In LA there's bands like TSOL, Christian Death, like they're all kind of like vibing on this like darker kind of thing. And then, but also at that time there's so much different stuff in the mix. There's like elements of the blues, with like about Jeffrey Lee Pierce and Gun Club. There's like a band like Gun Club who are like dark, but have like elements of the blues in them. Then you have TSOL, who have more straight ahead punk rock roots, but still have like that kind of like, they've got some keyboards and some of the stuff. Then there's stuff that's more like industrial electronic that's in the mix there. And so I love that era of music. I just think it's one of the coolest, because it's like nothing's been kind of shaken out yet. I mean, in a couple of years after that, this will be industrial, and this will be dark wave, and this will be goth, but at that point it's all like kind of in the mix. So I've always loved that music. I mean, to me it's yeah, goth is punks, like, like it's part of the broad spectrum of punk, which I mean is, I don't know, like punk rock is definitely my area of expertise. I don't know if it's true for other genres of music, but the one really interesting thing about punk rock is how many like specific flavors there are to it. Even bands that are like within the same subgenre, like oi or whatever, you go to different parts of the country, they're going to have different flavors to how they handle it. And that's the one thing I've always like really liked about punk rock. It's like, yeah, it's all punk rock, but there's just so many different variations to it that like all kind of maybe subscribe to the same attitude and overall thought process, but have so many different ways that they approach the music and the style of it.
Right. I think once you're immersed in a certain genre of music,
Mm-hmm.
you start to understand that there's all these different branches within that
Totally.
genre. But unless you're actually into it, you might just see, okay, well, that's just hip hop or that's just jazz, but there's so many different
Totally.
variations of it within the genre.
Oh, totally, totally. Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. Hip hop's a total another example. There's so many different threads in there. And if you look at it from the outside, it's like, oh, it's all hip hop or rap. But like, yeah, once you start like discovering it, and that's the other thing too that I really, really appreciate about hip hop. It's got that like very localized thing the same way punk rock does, where like the regional aspects of it really can contribute to like what the specific sound is of that artist based on their localized influences, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe it's true for like lots of other music that I just don't have enough knowledge of, you know? Like I mean, I kind of know a little bit about Jamaican music, and there's that kind of like, you know, that interesting shift between like ska and rock steady and dub and like, you know, but like I don't know enough about it to like sort to be able to tell you. I mean, I can tell you that, you know, Fugazi's this, and you know, that like, you know, a government issue is this. But
Right.
like, yeah, I just don't know enough about those other things. So maybe it exists in all kinds of music, and I'm just not aware of it, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Jamaican music, reggae, and is a good
Yeah, yeah.
another good example where there's all these different branches
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
of different
And
styles.
so many of them are just like kind of like stacked on top of each other, where they're like there's this very rapid shift between them, and maybe unless you have the ear for it, you maybe can't tell the difference between what makes this specific subgenre and what makes this something else, you know?
Yeah. And I think it's not hard to or uncommon to maybe really be a fan of one type of the genre and then
Oh yeah.
did really dislike the other
Oh,
type of the
totally, totally.
genre.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like people say, well, you don't like punk? Well, I like punk, but there's different styles of punk that I'm just like,
Right.
I just can't
Well,
get
no,
into.
no, no, yeah. I mean, no, I definitely I have a fondness for ska. I mean, just because it's like the first wave of ska is very much uh, based on like, you know, Jamaican artists kind of somewhat imitating what they hear in American blues music, and then reggae, not so much. There's definitely a lot of interesting stuff in it, but there's definitely like that kind of like weird like meeting point where ska's kind of like evolving, I guess, into reggae, where there's interesting stuff, and then it kind of gets to a point where it's like I kind of lose interest in it, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, it really is about knowing all the knowing how to dot the i's, you know, to know what's what.
What were your thoughts on the whole ska scene? Because South Florida and Florida in general had a lot of really
Yeah. um
popular ska bands pop
I
up.
I love first wave ska, the stuff from Jamaica. I love that. I love second wave ska because it's like it's basically a punk rock readaptation, and that's like, you know, the two-tone stuff and like the 80s British stuff. Selector, all those bands, because it's like and it's a punk rock readaptation of the sensibility of ska and fiercely anti-racist, which I think is absolutely amazing, you know. And then the third wave of ska, hit or miss. I think like a lot of it is like band kids that like discovered the sound, and so like it gave them like the impetus to go and play in a band. But then also bands that like, you know, were reinventing, like Against All Authority is a perfect example of that. Like, you know, there elements of ska in there for sure, but it's punk rock. You know, it's like modern punk rock, and it and like with anything, it's like the specific band draws from this buckets of different influences to create what they are. But yeah, yeah, a lot of the third wave stuff though is just kind of like, I don't know, kind of misses me. It's just kind of like, I don't know, too dorky, or maybe doesn't like um infuse enough of like the earlier roots, or see where it's coming from to know where to know don't know what makes that music special.
What was one of your favorite memories of seeing Against All Authority play?
Oh God, you know what? I was just thinking about this.
Mm.
The first show they ever played was with the Crumbs. So I think maybe the Crumbs had played like maybe 5 or 6 shows at that point. And Johnny, the guitar player in the Crumbs, he grew up with Danny and Joe from Against All Authority. And he said, "Hey, my friends are in this band called Against All Authority, and they really want to play a show. They haven't played a show yet, and they think that we can go play a show at Miami-Dade College. That we could go play a show at like Miami-Dade College, like out like in the like in the quad." And I was like, okay, that sounds, I was like, I assumed they'd gotten permission and stuff. And so we all got there and we started setting them in the quad, and I can't remember if we played first or if they played first, but whatever band played first, we got through exactly 1.5 songs before like the security said, no, this isn't happening. And so, we were like, oh, well, that fucking sucks. So then, one of the kids was like, well, my parents aren't home, so we can go play in our back in my backyard. So we're like, all right, cool. So we moved the show to the backyard, and so AAA played a full set, and that was their first show ever, and the Crumbs played, and then afterwards we got really drunk on wine and we all jumped in the pool with our clothes on. A lot of fun. But yeah, I was just reminded of like another amazing AAA show that I saw was, oh god, so there's this promoter named Nasty from Miami who booked a lot of different shows at a lot of different places, and for a while he had access to this a scale replica of a pirate ship that's in Biscayne Bay. And usually what it does, it takes tourists around. Like, you pay like $40 a person and they put you on this little like scale pirate boat and it takes you like around like Biscayne Bay. So somehow Nasty had convinced the owner that to have punk rock shows on it. So the pirate ship must have been in financial distress, because you always know when they start booking punk rock shows, a venue or anything, that that they're probably running out of money and ideas. So get some punk rock bands in here. That sounds great. So the Crumbs didn't play that. I just went on the to the show, and so those boats are I think maybe they're made to hold like 20 or 30 people, and there's probably close to like 100 kids that got on that boat. And so the other thing too is the boat moves like as it's going through the water. So like everybody sets up like equipment on deck, like AAA set up equipment on deck, and like everything's sliding around while they're playing, like as we're going through like the Biscay Bay. And then the other thing is the boat is like severely overloaded, so like it's like kind of like keying and yawing and stuff. Oh God, yes. And then they had 2 shows the same night, just so Kelly Ryan or something. But yeah, they also had 2 shows that same night, and like the second show was Mad Cow Disease. But yeah. Like I don't know, it was that's like such a unique like South Florida thing. Like I can't imagine that happening anywhere else. Like I would figure like somebody would go safety regulations or this is not a good idea. But no, it totally happened. It was really, really amazing. Yeah, and then so we continue to do these little pirate ship shows. I went on another one later, and they got out in the water and a storm happened, so everybody had to get like below deck, and so like everybody's like up against each other like this, and the boat's like, oh, like totally like going back and forth, and like we're all thinking we're gonna drown for a minute. Oh,
How
man.
far out to sea did the boat go?
Like just like in the harbor or Biscayne Bay, like so in the bay, but I mean far enough that you couldn't swim back to land. I mean, I guess you were a powerful swimmer, you probably could have, but like I mean maybe not. I'm probably not more than maybe a couple miles, maybe probably less than that. But yeah, I mean, and also what are the punks gonna do? They're all wearing all these stupid metal studs and stuff. They're gonna sink right away.
Right.
Yeah, that was totally another memorable Against All Authority show. Yeah, I'm
I
really
bet.
stoked they're back together. I feel like just like tensions in the band caused them to break up, and they weren't really ready to break up. So I'm very stoked that they're like playing again.
Yeah, it is very exciting times because they are back together.
Yeah. Yeah, they played the fest, and it looked awesome. I didn't go, but it looked awesome.
Yeah, there's are there a lot of shows that you still go to? Do you still stay connected to the
Yeah,
scene?
yeah. I mean, yeah, I still go to shows. I gotta really be in bed by 10 though. No, yeah. God, some friends of mine are in a band called 1983. So I go and see them every now and then. There's also, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like really cool like local bands around now that I still go see and stuff. I mean, yeah, definitely not as like I don't know. Yeah, I definitely I find sleep really, really cool now. When I was younger, I didn't really seem like I needed as much of it. So yeah, I mean, probably not as much as I used to, but yeah, I still enjoy going to shows for sure.
What band locally do you feel like you just maybe you took for granted? You didn't really check them out as much, and now in hindsight, you wish you would have saw them
Oh
a bit more.
man, that's a good question. Um, Shoot. Who, who? I don't know. That's really, I really would have to think about that. I can't think of any band. I mean, there's definitely bands where it's I kind of pride myself with being Johnny on the spot and being there for most of the stuff I like want to see. And yeah, even I didn't see their best night, like at least I saw like some of their shows. Yeah, I mean, there's not really anything that I can imagine that I can like recall right away where I like feel like I missed the boat on them, you know?
Were there other bands maybe outside of South Florida, maybe in other parts of the state where maybe you just couldn't get to see and you really wish you could have?
Yeah. I mean, like, I became a fan later, but Against Me are definitely like an interesting band that like I had a lot of opportunities to see early on, and then I really didn't. And I kind of feel like I maybe should have, and I maybe should have taken the time and energy to go see them when early on, you know.
And Chickenhead made it up to the Gainesville area, I want
Oh
to
yeah,
say a
yeah.
couple times. And what was it like being in playing in Gainesville? And were you aware of the scene that was going on up
Oh
there? Because they had
yeah,
their
oh, yeah,
whole
yeah,
whole
yeah.
whole scene going on.
Yeah, Gainesville's a really interesting scene. I mean, like it's been going on forever, and there is like a whole like older people contingent of that scene. Oh, that band Piss Test, which features Deborah, who was in Muttley Chicks at one point.
Yes.
Like yeah, so there is this great like older people Gainesville scene that I really love and respect. But yeah, Gainesville's one of those interesting scenes. You cannot play if you're an out of town band. You have to know somebody to play there because like it's very hard to like just call a venue unless you're like a well-joined national band and get a gig there. You have to know somebody that'll help you set up a gig, and also never play there when the kids are out of school. Like when the kids are go home for vacation, it's the worst. Because like yeah, I've played shows there with different bands I've been in, and it's been like, oh my god, like 200 kids, everybody's crazy and drunk and having fun. And then played another show with the same band, like you know, a couple months later, and there's 3 kids that didn't go home for the holidays, you know. But yeah, Gainesville, I definitely an inspiring scene for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely a whole lot going on up there. And
Yeah.
so out of all the bands that you had been in where maybe we didn't spend as much time or maybe even any time
Mhm.
talking about them, is there any one or two that really stand out for you? Like, yeah, like that was an important band, or maybe just something that you
Um,
just really just enjoyed. It was a good time to partake in that band.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed all of them at a certain point for sure, for sure. I mean, I guess like the two that I would like probably like call out if anybody wanted to go listen to them would be Party Flag, just because like the singer was amazing in that. Like one of those girl Justine who just natural some people just naturally have vocal ability, you know? Like some people you can go, hit this note, now hit this note, and they can do it without even thinking about it, like natural pitch, I guess. And I always felt like her lyrics were really strong and really great. And then the other band would be Die High slash Rat Sex. Like at first we were called Die High, and then halfway through the singer wanted to change the name to Rat Sex, and we said sure, why not? We've already printed up all these T-shirts and cassettes that say Die High, but let's go and change the name to Rat Sex. That's totally a great idea. So that band I really liked, just because the singer was such an interesting person, and his outlook on life was really unique.
I also like the Sandratz too.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Like kind of like yeah, dirty surf punk and stuff. Yeah,
yeah,
I dug that. I dug
yeah.
that band too. Yeah.
And you think you all played some pretty sizable
Oh
venues at
yeah,
the
yeah.
time?
Yeah, I got us on a show with Dead Milkmen.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then actually we went on a like a 2 or 3 week tour with this band from like West Palm Beach called New Coke. And they were well received. Like a lot of people really liked the records they put out. So yeah, we got to play with King Congo Powers band. He was in the Cramps. He was also in Jeffrey Lee Pierce's band, who I just mentioned, whose name escapes me now. But yeah, that was that was super cool. Yeah. San Francisco, we played some other big, open for Gangrene, I think. Yeah, just right place, right time for that band, I think.
Yeah. Now I know at that point in your career, you have you played so many shows in so many
Yeah.
different places. Uh, was it did it have the same feeling, or do you know?
Oh,
Uh,
maybe it's my lack of long-term memory that continues to make things exciting. If you can't remember what happened a couple of years ago, then it seems like a whole totally new experience that we'd be doing again. No, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's always exciting to play in a band. I mean, even now, it's like getting on stage. I still have those freaking, I still have those worms in my tummy, and like there's still that nervousness that automatically goes away once you start playing the first song. Like, but yeah, there's still that for sure. I mean, it's still, I don't know. Yeah, uh it's is it as exciting as the first time I played? I can't be. Physically. I mean, it's physically impossible. But is it still absolutely exciting? Totally, totally. It's still one of the most amazing feelings ever.
when someone doesn't know you and they stop you at a show and just want to chat with you, what do they want to talk about typically when they come up
Well,
to you?
it tends to be that like mostly their personal experiences, like which yeah, God, I hate to say this, but it happens a lot where it's like people will be like, "Oh, hey, what's up, Chuck? I don't know, you met me when I was like 15, yada yada," and it's like I have to do this thing where I have to look at them and then try and mentally age them forward to like, or mentally age them back to figure out who it is I'm talking to. But I think most people, which is this is the same thing that I do when I approach people that like are in bands that I love. I saw you blank 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 and blank 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 happened, and it really meant a lot to me. And so I totally get it. But yeah, and I think that's the other thing too that we take away from seeing live music is our personal experience of it. What we saw and what we heard and what it meant to us. And so yeah, I mean that tends to be the kind of things that like people like talk about, or like, yeah, I mean, and it is really good because it's like so much has happened, it really is difficult to remember all of it. So it is really really cool to remember, like somebody will bring up some specific show and I'll be like, oh yeah, and I'm immediately kind of transported back there, which is another thing with like the poster thing too, is like it there's certain like when people buy the posters, sometimes they'll be like, oh, I was at that show and this happened, and I was like, yes, totally, that's what it's meant to remind you of, like your personal experience of it, because that's the thing that lasts, is like your feeling and how and what it meant to you. So yeah, that's what a lot of people tend to ask me about, which is, I totally understand it.
Do people usually bring up a story or a memory that no
Oh,
matter how hard you try, you honestly don't remember that moment?
sometimes, and then typically like I'll be in the shower later and I'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that happened. Yeah. For years though, it would be like set yourself on fire, like at shows, everybody yelling that at me. And but yeah, but also, or people saying they saw that show, but I knew there's no way there was enough people there at that show that everybody could have seen that. But yeah. No, there it is. I'm honestly, I'm really thankful when people do that, because it does remind me of that personal experience that like maybe looking at the flyer doesn't remind me of. Like remembering how that night was, and this person did this and this person played and they were amazing, and like, like the personal impact it had.
Is there any style of music that you have not tapped into yet that you would like to?
Oh God, I don't know. Like, geez. Um, that's the thing, is like so when I was in that band, like Rat Six, I just mentioned, sometimes the singer would show up, he goes, we should sound more like this band. We should sound more like this band. And it would change from week to week. And we would just kind of laugh it off. And I was like, listen, if you want to sound like that, let's write a song in that style. It's still gonna sound, we'll write a song in that style. It's still gonna sound like us because it's us. But like, let that influence it and stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I can't really consciously think of it. But although I would kind of feel that like if I was in the right band with the right people, and like those influences started working themselves in, that it would be kind of like, oh yeah, that's where we should go with it. But yeah, there's nothing that I've consciously, I mean, I don't know, maybe funk. I love the rhythms, and especially the I mean the drum and bass interaction with a lot of like 70s and early 80s funk for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, I wouldn't I wouldn't consciously set out to create a band that's like that, but I would maybe like, yeah, because that's the thing is like over the years, I want to start bands with people and they'd be like, well, what do you want to sound like? I'm like, I don't know. Let's just play and see what it sounds like. Bring, like find an idea that you like and bring it and let's like mess around with it and see what we come up with. Like it shouldn't be like we're trying to sound like something. It should be that we're trying, bringing an idea to the table, but that it isn't, let's not try and sound like that. Let's try and like work that into what we do,
Right.
But yeah. I mean, something that definitely influences me is like a lot of like that the funk music from that era, just because it is so rhythm heavy, like it's very, very driven by rhythm, which I really appreciate. And just being a drummer, I really appreciate that that connection between bass player and drummer, just because I kind of feel bass is like kind of the halfway point between the guitar and the rhythm, between the guitar and the drums.
There's still time.
Yeah, oh yeah. I'm still young, man. I still got at least like another 15 to 30 bands in my future.
Oh, wow. That would take us up to what, 60 bands at
Yeah,
that point? Is there,
something like that.
what's the Guinness World Record for the amount of bands someone has played in before? So, because it's a pretty long list
Yeah.
of
30
bands.
years of wasting my time and energy. No, I mean I love it. Yeah, whatever. Right? It's just it makes life better.
Are you actively seeking bands, or do people come and just come to you and recruit you? This
Yeah,
band.
yeah. Typically, I mean, there's people that I've wanted to be in bands with that I'll go like, go talk to about it. Yeah, like well, I'm working on a band now with a friend, which should be interesting just because his musical influences are like somewhat different than mine. But I kind of figured that, I mean, not that like I have this very limited set of musical influences, but like I figure there's like going to be an interesting meeting point there. But that's just like somebody that like I've known for a long time, and I know they can sing because I saw them do karaoke, and so the idea of being in a band with them has like always been like somewhat appealing to me.
Speaking of karaoke, Chuck,
Yeah.
when you do, or if you were to do karaoke, what song would you fill out on the paper and
Uh,
want to sing?
the go-to would probably be like the B-52s, anything by the B-52s. Um, God. Uh,
Love Shack.
no, no,
I
no.
was
Something,
kidding.
something from Love Shack. No, something from like maybe like the first two albums, the more like
The more
God.
new wavy punk
Yeah, the more new like the
B-52s.
really new wavy stuff, like
Yeah.
uh
Private
like
Idaho.
Give Me Back My Man. Um
Devil in My Car.
yeah. Oh God, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, or I mean AC/DC are always good ones to go to because everybody knows it. They're easy to rock. Um, oh, there's an Annie Lennox song, "Walking on Broken Glass," which is also the go-to. Like, because it's not too complicated, but it's such a great song.
I didn't
Yeah.
hear any traditional punk in that answer. So,
Well, if
uh,
it's gonna if it's gonna be karaoke, why?
yeah,
Like why? My day off. What do I? Why do what I do during the week? I mean,
that's
like
right.
karaoke, it gives you like the opportunity to like do stuff that you normally wouldn't ever, wouldn't necessarily have the opportunity to do. Maybe some Fleetwood Mac, like a Fleetwood Mac song or two. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, Holiday Road by Lindsey Buckingham. Speaking of Fleetwood Mac, that's
Okay, I can get behind that song. Yes, from National Lampoon's
yes,
Vacation.
totally,
Good
absolutely.
tune. Good tune. And just speaking on that, is there any song or band that people would be surprised that Chuck Loose listens to?
Um, God, I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty open about like expressing that I'm not it's not this like very walled in box of like, I mean, I guess like if you look at like the music I've played, maybe people might get the impression that it's this very kind of limited thing, but I don't know, I'm pretty open about like expressing that I love ABBA, and like stuff that's like, God, what I've been listening to. Oh, I've been listening to like Broadway musical soundtracks lately, and those are great. I was listening to Little Shop of Horrors soundtrack and the Beetlejuice, the Broadway version of the Beetlejuice soundtrack. So yeah, I think those are Broadway music's interesting. It's super cool. Like, oh my God, it's so full of like really good Broadway musicals are so full of like double entendres and like cynicism and little funny in jokes and like all run together in this really rapid pace that you have to like really be like listening to catch. And maybe you got to listen to the song like 3 or 4 times before you catch all the little jokes that are in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Does that seem weird to like? Would that seem like outside? I don't know. I'm pretty open about like
I don't know
explaining.
anymore, really, but I think listening to musicals like that, especially when you're driving, something to sing along with, and it's a little different than your traditional just, rock band or hip hop or
Yeah.
whatever it is you're listening to. So,
Yeah.
uh,
I'm trying to think anything else that's like that. It's like that far out of the ordinary. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, my typical like mixes that are like I listen to during the workday are like everything from like, you know, I don't know, God, like Return of the Mac to like Hank Williams to like, you know,
Return of the Mac, the song
yes. By
by Mark
oh yeah,
Morrison. Is
oh my God.
that the
Okay,
same one we're talking about?
yeah. Return
Okay.
by oh my God, who's it by? Who's by Return of the Mac by?
Mark Morrison.
Yes, Mark Morrison. Oh my God.
Mhm.
All right. So I really got into Mark Morrison for a small amount of time, and I got really into like reading about him. This is the most amazing thing. So he had like a bunch. He put out a bunch of songs, and they never really went anywhere. And so he recorded Return of the Mac, and they released it, and it suddenly got really popular. Unfortunately, when it got really popular, he was on probation, and so he couldn't tour. And the label says you got to tour now, like when it's hot. Like, if you wait, then it's going to lose its momentum. So he got one of his friends to pretend to be him to talk to his probation officer while he went on tour. He got totally busted. Like the probation officer's not going to like realize this is a totally different individual. But I thought that was the most Mac move ever. Like I'm still going on tour. You pretend you're me. I'll be back in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Okay, the other, okay, maybe, yeah, yes. My girlfriend Kelly just reminded me, we watched the Disney movie Encanto, and the soundtrack for that is awesome. I love it. I love it. It's funny because like some of the people I share office space with, I mentioned to them, oh, my kids listen to this too much. I'm sick of it. I was like, it's so good though. It's so awesome. So yeah, I guess maybe that is that the people think I wouldn't listen to that.
So if
I do.
someone
Condo, you kids.
if someone's in an earshot of your business, they can hear you playing that.
Yeah, singing along.
Yeah,
Yeah. Totally.
that's
Absolutely.
great, man.
Yeah. No apologies.
Yeah, you shouldn't have any. If music, I'm under the mantra of music is good. Why not listen to it? If you
No,
like
totally.
it, why not listen to it?
Oh my God. Yeah, no, I mean, like, all music has something to offer. Yeah, I mean, like, I'll have friends that like, oh, I don't like X genre, and it's like, it, I don't want to say it's like it's ignorant to say that, but you really should try and listen to it. I mean, okay, maybe you don't like it. Maybe after you listen to like 50 bands in that genre, you have the honest opinion you don't like it. But that's never been the case for me. I mean, like, something, and I'm always like trying to like if something maybe like kind of like like I feel sour toward at the beginning, I'm going to force myself to listen to it just so I either come to the realization of why I don't like it or find the good things about it. So yeah. I mean, and God, in music, listen, at the end of the day, the point of music is to inspire you, to make you feel better or worse, to help you deal with sadness, to help you deal with trauma, to help you to feel better about whatever. So it's like it's silly to limit yourself to not wanting to experience that whole like the whole rainbow of that.
Yeah. And all the work that you've done
Hmm?
over the years, has anyone approached you, whether in person or via message, where you kind of got the feeling, even if they didn't come out and say it, that you maybe inspired them?
Yeah. I mean, totally. I mean, yeah, there's definitely, I mean, there's people that have like told me that. Yeah, I mean, I try and take it with a grain of salt. I mean, I'm again in the same way that I approach people that like did that for me. Like if I can, if I can return that gift to somebody else, awesome. I'm very, very excited about that. Yeah, but totally. No, I mean, that's the way it should work, right? Like we should be able to pass down like and exchange that gift of like being excited about something when we hear it, like as much as we can. I mean, that's the payoff, right? I mean, that's the thing when it's no, it's the same thing about art. Like when it actually, when people look at it and it connects with them, like on like a subliminal level, not subliminal, like a sublime level. When something actually means something to somebody, and they get something from it, art, music, whatever it is, that's the payoff. Like when somebody like maybe even it's not what you intended them for them to take, but when they take something away from it that's meaningful to them, that's the whole point of art. That's the whole point of good art.
I would agree.
Right on.
And you've made plenty of it, and you continue to make plenty of it, whether it be musically, whether it be the art behind you and all the posters that you haven't made yet, or other stuff
Oh,
too, right? Because you do more than just posters, right?
oh yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All kinds of art. Yeah, yeah. But no, no, yeah. Yeah. Listen, when I was younger, when I was in Chickenhead, I was very self-destructive, and so I really didn't think I was going to live this long. And the fact that I have lived this long is actually really, really a good feeling. And it feels like it's not going to end anytime soon. It feels like this is gonna keep on going for a while. So I'm very thankful, and I'm very happy about it for sure. Yeah, yeah. Hopefully my greatest work is still ahead of me. Hopefully.
Hey man, you have a lot of people who are definitely behind you, and
Right on.
a lot of fans of a lot of the music that you've done, and also the great work you do artistically. So, uh,
I appreciate it. I appreciate you saying that for sure.
hey man, and it's been an honor getting a chance to sit down with you today and
Right
and
on.
and and,
Yeah,
and
dude.
talk
Thank you for
about your life and your musical journey. And I'm sure if we were doing the full end to end, we could probably be here for 48 hours.
right on. No, no. Yes, I really appreciate you having me on, dude. I love the podcast. I love the fact that like somebody cares enough about South Florida music, culture, and heritage to like take the time to document it. It's important. I mean, without documentation, we don't know what happened.
Right, right. And one of the things that I have always noticed over the years, and I know you've done your share of interviews with different zines and other types of printed media, whether it be digitally or physical, what have you. And there's something different when you're doing a kind of a conversation like this,
Oh, right.
where
No, absolutely.
the different ways you can kind of segue in different parts of the conversation and what have you, versus just doing an interview where everything's being kind of written down. So,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's all your words. These are your memories, your experiences and what have you. So,
No,
uh
it's definitely more of a human to human
yeah,
experience, which I think is, yeah, one of the great things about modern technology. I mean, like, yeah, zine interviews were great, and sometimes maybe you could capture the personality of the person, but I mean, like, hearing the person's voice and seeing their facial expressions, yeah, 90% of human communication is nonverbal. Like, yeah, that means a lot more as far as communicating the tone and nature of what the person is trying to get across, for sure.
that's right. And I don't typically make a lot of announcements of upcoming guests. Usually, I like a bit of I like the suspense and surprise of everything. So, but I will announce, because there's a close tie between you and the next guest, and it just so happened to work out that way. I wasn't planning on doing on booking it this way. But Jeff Hodap will be coming
Oh,
on,
oh, dude,
the
awesome.
next guest on the
Yes.
podcast. So
Right
I
on.
would
Oh, I gotta listen
expect
to that one.
I would expect more stories from
Yes.
Czars, and of course Roach Motel and
Oh
Trapped by
my God.
Mormons and
Dude,
all
yeah.
kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God, yeah, yeah. And Jeff, oh God, yeah, the Roach Motel era of Florida punk rock is so, just the stories he's told me is like, it's insane. Like because they were like, oh my God, yeah, they were just totally like unexplored realms. Like being punk rock in that era. I mean, I grew up in rural New Mexico. It was tough being a funny looking kid, but Florida, oh, it was, yeah. The stories that him and George Tav told me about those Roach Motel days are pretty insane. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, you and I both. And yep, so that's the next episode that'll be coming up in the month of February.
Awesome.
So stay tuned for that. But Chuck, what a pleasure it has been to have you on. Any last words you want to share before we wrap up today?
Oh no, that's it. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. Keep on doing the good thing.